Blood never washes away the hands of power. But can it wash away the soul? Tonight, Alara Vance slaps a crime boss right in front of his underworld empire. Mistake or fate? She doesn't know. But when Dante Moretti doesn't kill her, instead, he smiles. She understands that death might be gentler than what's about to happen. This is a story about power, choice, and the thin line between devil and man. Watch to the end. Hit like, and comment the name of the city you're watching in, so I know how far this story has progressed. The fluorescent lights in Moretti's diner buzzed like dying wasps, flickering in rhythm with the ancient ventilation system that barely moved the grease-thick air. Alara Vance's hands ached, not the surface kind of ache that comes from a long shift, but the deep bone exhaustion that settles into your marrow after 5 doubles in 6 days. Her apron was a battlefield of coffee stains and ketchup streaks, her hair escaping its bun in sweaty tendrils that stuck to her neck. She moved on autopilot now, muscle memory guiding her through the choreography of wiping down tables, refilling salt shakers, pretending the world outside these grimy windows didn't exist. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until freedom. The diner occupied a corner lot in a neighborhood that had given up pretending to be respectable sometime in the 90s. Bars on windows, graffiti that got painted over just enough to avoid citations, but never enough to actually look clean. The kind of place where people didn't make eye contact unless they wanted something from you. Alara had grown up 3 blocks from here, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every corner where deals went down after dark. This wasn't the life she'd planned. But then again, medical school hadn't planned on her mother's cancer, or the bills that swallowed her scholarship money, or the way dreams died slowly, one shift at a time. She was reaching for the coffee pot to top off the trucker in booth 7 when the door opened. The temperature dropped. That's how it felt anyway, like someone had sucked the warmth out of the room and replaced it with something cold and watchful. The normal diner sounds, clinking silverware, the hiss of the grill. That one table of teenagers trying to make a single order of fries last 3 hours, all of it seemed to muffle, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Alara turned. 3 men stood in the doorway. No, not men. Predators in expensive suits, the kind of tailoring that cost more than she made in 6 months. The first 2 were broad-shouldered, silent, scanning the room with the mechanical precision of security cameras. But it was the 3rd man who made her fingers tighten on the coffee pot handle until her knuckles went white. Dante Moretti. Everyone in this neighborhood knew the name. You didn't grow up here without learning which names you didn't say out loud, which streets you didn't walk down after dark, which buildings you didn't look at too long. The Morettis had owned this part of the city for 3 generations, not through politicians or paperwork, but through the kind of power that didn't need documentation. Protection rackets, loan sharking, gambling. The rumors said worse, but rumors were cheap currency in neighborhoods like this. Dante himself was younger than Alara expected, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so utterly devoid of warmth. He moved like violence constrained, each step deliberate, controlled. His eyes were the color of slate before a storm, and they swept across the diner with the casual assessment of a man who owned everything he looked at. The few customers still lingering suddenly discovered urgent reasons to focus on their plates. Alara's manager, Rick, a pot-bellied man who'd been half asleep behind the register, jerked upright like someone had shoved a cattle prod up his spine. His face went the color of old newspaper. "Mr. Moretti?" Rick stammered, practically tripping over himself to come out from behind the counter. "We weren't expecting, if you'd called ahead." Dante didn't look at him. His gaze had locked onto something, someone in the back corner booth. Maya. Alara's stomach turned to ice. Her best friend sat alone, hunched over a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, and even from across the room, Alara could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the mug. Maya had been dodging Alara's calls for 3 days, had been jumpy, distracted, making excuses. Now Alara understood why. Dante crossed the diner in 6 strides, his guards flanking him like satellites orbiting a dark star. The teenagers in the corner booth scrambled out so fast one of them left his jacket behind. By the time Dante reached Maya's table, the only sounds in the diner were the buzz of the lights and the hammering of Alara's heart. "Maya Chen." Dante's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Somehow that made it worse. We need to talk about your brother. Maya didn't look up. He's not here. I know where he is. Dante slid into the booth across from her with the fluid ease of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Macau. Spent 3 days at the tables before security escorted him out. Lost everything, of course. Your brother has a gift for self-destruction. That's not my problem. Maya's voice cracked on the last word. It is when he borrowed against your name. Dante pulled a folded paper from his inside jacket pocket, smoothed it on the table. $87,000. Your signature. Your collateral. Alara's feet were moving before her brain caught up, the coffee pot still in her hand as she crossed the diner. Every rational voice in her head was screaming at her to stop, to turn around, to let this play out without getting involved. But Maya was family. Not blood, but the kind of family you chose when your real one fell apart. They'd grown up in the same crumbling apartment building, had stolen groceries together when things got desperate, had held each other through the kind of losses that either broke you or forged you into something harder. I didn't sign anything, Maya said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Dante's expression didn't change. He forged it beautifully, almost professional quality. Of course, the debt is still valid. Your brother listed your cafe as collateral, the one your grandmother left you. He paused. I'll own it by Friday unless the full amount is paid. Maya's face crumpled. Alara watched her best friend, the strongest person she knew, the one who'd raised 2 younger siblings after their parents died, who'd built a business from nothing, break apart in real time. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks, and she didn't even try to wipe them away. Please, Maya whispered. That cafe is all I have. My grandmother, it's all that's left of her. I'll pay you back, I swear, just give me time. Time. Dante said the word like he was tasting something bitter. Everyone wants more time, as if time isn't the most expensive thing I sell. He leaned back, studying Maya with the clinical interest of an entomologist examining a pinned butterfly. Your brother knew you'd beg, counted on it. He's probably in some hotel right now, already planning his next con. He's sick, he has a problem. He has a choice. Dante's voice went cold. We all do. He chose cards and roulette. You chose to be connected to him. Now you choose how this ends. Something ugly flickered across his face. Not anger, but something worse. Contempt. Pure, absolute dismissal of Maya's humanity, her worth, her existence beyond the numbers on that paper. People like you, Dante continued, his voice soft as a blade between ribs, think you're owed something. Think the world should make exceptions because you're sad, because you tried hard, because your grandmother made mediocre coffee for 40 years in a building that should have been condemned in the 80s. He flicked the paper with one finger. Friday, 6 p.m. Be there with cash or the locks get changed. That's when Alara's body acted without consulting her survival instincts. The slap echoed like a gunshot. Her palm connected with Dante Moretti's cheek with enough force to snap his head to the side. The coffee pot fell from her other hand, shattering on the floor in an explosion of glass and lukewarm coffee. The sound seemed to detonate the silence that had gripped the diner, releasing it all at once into a cacophony of gasps and the scrape of chairs as people scrambled backward. Alara stood frozen, her hand still raised, her palm stinging, staring at what she'd just done. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Dante's head stayed turned to the side, a red handprint blooming across his cheek. His guards reached inside their jackets. For guns, knives, Alara's mind supplied helpfully through the static of shock. But Dante raised one finger. They stopped. Waited. Slowly, Dante turned his head back to face her, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just tasted blood in the water and realized how hungry it was. Well, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the diner like a shout. Finally. Alara's breath came in short, sharp gasps. Her vision tunneled, darkening at the edges. This was it. This was how she died. Not in some hospital bed like her mother, wasting away degree by degree, but here, in a shitty diner, over a debt that wasn't even hers. She waited for the guards to move, for hands to grab her, for pain. Instead, Dante stood, smoothly, unhurriedly, and stepped close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sharp, like cedar and smoke. What's your name? He asked. Her mouth was desert dry. Alara. Alara. He said it like he was memorizing the taste of it. Do you have any idea who I am? Yes. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. If she was going to die, she'd do it without begging. Everyone knows who you are, and yet you hit me anyway. That smile again, but different now, curious, almost delighted. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why? Because Maya was crying. Because this man in his $1,000 suit was grinding his heel into someone who'd never had a chance. Because the world was full of people like him who took and took and took. And people like her and Maya, who had nothing left to give but still got told it wasn't enough. Because you're a bully, Ilara said, and someone needed to. The air left the room again. One of the guards made a sound, disbelief maybe, or anger. Dante held up his hand again without looking away from Ilara's face. A bully, he repeated thoughtfully. Not a businessman, not a product of circumstance, a bully. Call it whatever helps you sleep. I sleep fine. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You're not stupid. Scared, yes. I can see your pulse in your throat, see the way you're fighting the urge to run. But you hit me anyway. That takes either bravery or insanity. Maybe both. Dante laughed. Actually laughed. A sound so unexpected that Ilara flinched. It wasn't a kind laugh, but it wasn't entirely cruel either. It was the laugh of someone encountering something genuinely surprising for the first time in a long time. I like you, he said simply. Then he turned to Maya. Your debt is forgiven. Maya's head snapped up, hope and disbelief warring on her face. What? The 87,000, consider it a gift. Dante straightened his cuffs, the red mark on his cheek already fading. Your brother, however, is no longer welcome in any establishment I control. If he shows up again, he'll lose more than money. He started toward the door, his guards moving to follow. Ilara's heart was trying to hammer its way out of her chest. This didn't make sense. Men like Dante Moretti didn't forgive debts because someone slapped them. There had to be a catch, a hidden cost. Dante paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. Ilara, he said, you have 24 hours. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of dread through her stomach. For what? To decide if you're as brave as you pretend to be. His eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or might have been threat, probably both. Someone will be in touch. Then he was gone, his guards melting into the night behind him, leaving only the smell of expensive cologne and the wreckage of Ilara's ordinary life scattered across the diner floor. The silence held for 5 seconds before it shattered. Jesus Christ! Rick's voice cracked. Jesus Christ, Ilara, what the hell did you just do? Maya was still sitting in the booth, staring at the debt paper like it might burst into flames. He forgave it. He actually... She looked up at Ilara, and her expression was pure terror. Why would he do that? Ilara didn't have an answer. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving behind a cold, sick feeling in her gut. She sank into the booth across from Maya, glass crunching under her shoes. I don't know, she whispered. But that was a lie. She did know. Or at least she suspected. Men like Dante Moretti didn't give gifts. They made investments. The question was, what had she just become collateral for? Mpulke. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Rick made her clean up the broken coffee pot, muttering under his breath about insurance and liability and how he couldn't afford to have gangsters showing up and terrifying customers. Maya left without finishing her coffee, pulling Ilara into a bone-crushing hug and whispering thank you over and over until the words lost meaning. Ilara walked home alone. The streets at 1 a.m. were a different city than the daylight version, darker, more honest. Streetlights buzzed and flickered, casting pools of sickly yellow light across cracked pavement. Somewhere distant, sirens wailed. A car alarm went off, was silenced, went off again. Normal soundtrack to a neighborhood where normal meant negotiating the small dangers to avoid the big ones. Ilara's apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had been historical, when historical meant old and falling apart rather than charming. No elevator. Graffiti in the stairwell that she'd stopped reading years ago. The smell of curry and cigarette smoke and desperation soaked into the walls. She unlocked 3 deadbolts, stepped inside, locked them again. Her apartment was small, studio really, with a kitchenette that was more decorative than functional, and a bathroom where the shower only worked if you turned the knob exactly 37 degrees to the left. But it was hers. She'd fought for every square foot of it, worked doubles and triples to make rent, ate ramen for weeks to afford the security deposit. Alara dropped her keys on the counter, peeled off her coffee-stained apron, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked exhausted. 26 years old, but her eyes looked 40, the kind of tired that sleep didn't fix. Dark circles. Hair that needed a cut she couldn't afford. A face that was pretty enough, she supposed, in the way that didn't matter when you were too busy surviving to care about things like pretty. She thought about Dante's smile, the way he'd looked at her like she was a problem he wanted to solve. 24 hours. Alara turned on the shower, waited for the water to heat. It never got hot, just less cold, and stood under the spray until her skin pruned and the water ran clear of the diner's grease and grime. She tried not to think about what would happen tomorrow, tried to convince herself that maybe this was over, that Dante had been playing some kind of power game, and now he'd forget about her. She knew better. When she finally crawled into bed, sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars slide across the water-stained plaster, and waited for dawn. The call came at 9 a.m. Alara had been awake for hours, running on coffee and anxiety, when her phone lit up with an unknown number. She stared at it through 3 rings before answering. Yes? Miss Vance. The voice was male, professional, utterly devoid of warmth. A car will arrive at your address in 1 hour. Be ready. Who is this? Someone who suggests you don't ask unnecessary questions. A pause. Dress appropriately. The line went dead. Alara sat on the edge of her bed, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone. Her stomach twisted into short knots. She could ignore this, could pretend the call never came, go to her shift at the diner, continue her life as if last night hadn't happened. Except she couldn't, because men like Dante Moretti didn't make suggestions. They made inevitabilities. And if she ran, what happened to Maya? What happened to everyone else she cared about? Dress appropriately. Alara opened her closet. The contents were depressing. Waitress uniforms, jeans with holes that weren't fashionable, t-shirts bought in multi-packs from discount stores. She had exactly one nice outfit, a black dress she'd worn to her mother's funeral and hadn't touched since. It still had the dry cleaning tag on it. She put it on. The fabric felt wrong, too formal, like wearing a costume. She brushed her hair, pulled it into a neat ponytail, found her only pair of non-sneakers, black flats that pinched her toes. Looked in the mirror again. Still looked tired. But at least she looked like someone who might belong in the same room as $1,000 suits. The car arrived exactly 1 hour later. Not a car. A Mercedes. Black, gleaming, completely out of place on her street. The kind of vehicle that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. A man in a dark suit stood beside the rear door, waiting. Not one of the guards from last night, but cut from the same cloth, all muscle and cold professionalism. Alara descended the 4 flights of stairs, each step feeling like walking toward a cliff edge. The morning air was thick with humidity, promising rain later. A few neighbors watched from windows and stoops, faces carefully neutral. In neighborhoods like this, you learn not to see things. The guard opened the door without speaking. Alara hesitated. This was it, the last moment where she could turn around, run back upstairs, call the police, and tell them, what? That a crime lord had sent a car for her? The police in this neighborhood worked for Moretti as much as they worked for the city. Everyone knew it. Everyone pretended not to. She got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and money. The seats were cream-colored, probably worth more than her monthly rent. The guard closed the door with a solid thunk that felt like a prison gate locking. They drove. Alara watched her neighborhood slide past the tinted windows, the bodega where she bought her coffee, the laundromat where she washed her uniforms, the park where she and Maya used to sit on summer evenings and pretend they had better lives waiting somewhere in the future. All of it felt distant now, like looking at a photograph of someone else's life. The city changed as they drove. Buildings got taller, cleaner, graffiti disappeared. The people on the sidewalks wore business suits and carried briefcases instead of survival in their eyes. This was the part of the city Alara had always known existed but had never really belonged to, where money wasn't something you fought for but something that simply existed, abundant, taken for granted. They pulled through gates that swung open automatically onto a private drive lined with manicured hedges. At the end stood a house. No, mansion. Gray stone, ivy-covered walls, windows that reflected the morning sun like watching eyes. It looked like something out of a movie, the kind of place where powerful people made decisions that ruined ordinary lives. The car stopped. The guard opened her door. This way. Alara stepped out onto gravel that crunched under her flats. Up close, the mansion was even more intimidating. 3 stories of old money and older power, the kind of building that had probably stood here for a century, watching the city grow up around it. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun, and the kind of posture that suggested military training or ballet, maybe both. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry, but somehow managed to look more expensive than Alara's entire existence. "Miss Vance," the woman said, not a question. "Follow me." The interior was all marble and dark wood, paintings on the walls that were probably worth more than houses, the kind of silence that only came from spaces too large for sound to fill. Alara's footsteps echoed as she followed the woman through a foyer, down a hallway lined with closed doors, each one hiding who knew what. They stopped at a door near the back of the house. The woman knocked twice, waited. "Enter," Dante's voice. The woman opened the door, gestured for Alara to go in, then disappeared without a word. The office was smaller than Alara expected. No, not small, just proportioned differently. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 2 walls, actual books, leather-bound and old. A massive desk positioned to face windows that looked out onto gardens that probably required a full-time staff. Everything in the room spoke of control, order, power, exercised with precision. Dante sat behind the desk, reading something on a tablet. He didn't look up immediately, and Alara understood this was deliberate. A power play, making her wait, reminding her who controlled this space. She stood in silence, counting her heartbeats, until finally he set the tablet aside and looked at her. "You came." He sounded genuinely pleased. "I wasn't certain you would. You didn't give me much choice." "There's always a choice." Dante gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." Alara sat. The chair was leather, comfortable, probably cost more than everything in her apartment combined. She folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. In the morning light, he looked different than he had in the diner, less predator, more businessman. But the danger was still there, coiled beneath the surface, waiting. "Tell me about yourself," he said finally. "Why?" "Because I'm curious." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You slapped me in front of witnesses. Either you're suicidal or you have principles. I'm betting on the latter. Does it matter?" "It does to me." He waited. When she didn't respond, he continued. "I did some research. Alara Vance, 26, graduated top of your high school class. Full scholarship to State University, pre-med track. Made it 2 years before your mother got sick. Dropped out to care for her, worked 3 jobs to cover medical bills. She died anyway." His voice held no sympathy, just facts. "You've been working at that diner for 4 years. No criminal record, no debt, no relationships that lasted more than a few months. You live alone, eat alone, exist alone." Heat crept up Alara's neck, anger and embarrassment mixed. "What's your point?" "My point is that you're wasted." Dante said it simply, like commenting on the weather. "You're smart, capable, and you've spent 4 years serving coffee to people who don't see you. Last night was the first time you've probably felt alive in years." The words hit harder than Alara wanted to admit. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're here." Dante leaned forward. "I know that when I told you to choose between bravery and pretense, you chose to show up. That tells me everything I need." "Need for what?" "I have a proposition." Alara's hands tightened on the armrests. "I'm not interested in—" "Your friend's debt," Dante interrupted. "I can forgive it, completely. Have the paperwork destroyed, Her brother's name blacklisted from every casino and card room in 3 states. Maya keeps her cafe, builds the life her grandmother wanted for her. In exchange for what? You. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Alara's throat went dry. I'm not going to... Not like that. Dante's expression didn't change. I need an assistant. Someone smart, observant, not already corrupted by my world. Someone who can see problems I can't because I'm too close to them. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. His eyes glittered. You proved last night you can do that. You want me to work for you. I want you to work with me. He pushed a folder across the desk. This is the offer. Read it. Alara opened the folder with hands that trembled slightly. Inside was a contract, pages of it, dense legal language that would take hours to parse properly. But the key numbers jumped out: salary, benefits, housing allowance, all of them obscene, more money than she'd make in 5 years at the diner. Why? She looked up. Why me? You could hire anyone, because everyone else would say yes for the money. Dante's voice went soft, dangerous. You're going to say yes for the right reason. Which is? To save your friend. He leaned back again. That's what you do, isn't it? Save people. Saved your mother, even though it cost you everything. Saved Maya last night, even though you knew it might cost you your life. You're a rescuer, Alara. It's not a strength, it's a weakness. But it's a weakness I can use. The honesty of it was almost refreshing. No pretense, no manipulation disguised as kindness. Just cold, clear calculation. And if I say no? Maya loses her cafe Friday at 6 p.m. Her brother will destroy her life completely within a month. I've seen his type before. She'll spiral, lose everything, probably end up working in a place worse than where you are now. Dante paused. And you'll go back to your apartment, your shifts, your slowly dying life. Nothing changes except now you know you could have saved her and chose not to. Alara wanted to throw the folder in his face. Wanted to tell him to go to hell, that she wouldn't be bought or manipulated or turned into whatever he was trying to make her, but the words stuck in her throat because he was right. About Maya, about the choice, about her. How long? She asked quietly. Indefinitely. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Dante stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. This world I operate in, it's not temporary work. You don't clock in and out. You're in until you're not useful anymore, or until you leave. And if I want to leave, then you leave. He turned to face her. I'm not going to lock you in a basement, Alara. That's not how this works. You'll have freedom, autonomy, a life, but you'll also have responsibilities, obligations. And yes, there will be things you see and do that will keep you awake at night. You're describing a prison with better furniture. Dante smiled that shark smile again. I'm describing the truth. Most people prefer the lies. Alara looked down at the contract. The numbers blurred in her vision. This was insane. She'd be working for a criminal, enabling whatever dark empire he'd built, trading her soul for Maya's cafe and her own comfort. Every moral fiber she had was screaming at her to run. But she thought about Maya's face when Dante had threatened to take everything. Thought about the way her mother had looked in those final days, the light slowly leaving her eyes as the cancer won. Thought about her own face in the mirror this morning, exhausted and defeated and so goddamn tired of losing. If I agree, she said slowly, I want guarantees, in writing, that Maya is protected, that her cafe stays hers, that her brother can't touch her again. Done. And I want to be able to leave if I can't do it anymore. You can leave any time. Dante returned to his desk, pulled out a pen, made a note on the contract, though I suspect you won't. Why? Because you're going to discover something about yourself. He slid the pen across to her. You're going to discover that you're good at this. That the part of you that slapped me last night isn't the aberration. It's who you actually are under all that exhaustion and self-sacrifice. You're angry, Alara. You've been angry for a long time. This is a chance to do something with it. Alara picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive, probably cost more than a week's wages. Her hand hovered over the signature line. This was the moment, the choice that would split her life into before and after. She could still walk away, could leave this mansion, get back in that Mercedes, return to her apartment and her shifts and the slow grinding poverty that was killing her by degrees. Or she could sign, could step into whatever dark world Dante inhabited, could save Maya and maybe, just maybe, save herself in the process. She signed. The pen scratched across the paper with a sound like tearing. Dante took the contract, examined her signature, then smiled, genuinely smiled, the first real warmth she'd seen from him. "Welcome," he said, "to the rest of your life." The next hours passed in a disorienting blur. The woman from earlier, Mrs. Chen, Dante's head of household, appeared to escort Alara through what felt like orientation for a job she didn't fully understand. There would be an apartment provided, Mrs. Chen explained in her precise, emotionless voice, in a building Dante owned in a neighborhood Alara had only seen in magazines. Furniture would be arranged, a car and driver at her disposal, a clothing allowance because her current wardrobe was, in Mrs. Chen's delicate phrasing, insufficient for the requirements of the position. Alara followed in a daze, trying to process the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. They ended up in another office, smaller, adjacent to Dante's, with windows overlooking the same manicured gardens. This would be hers, Mrs. Chen said. Computer, phone, files, everything she'd need. Her responsibilities would become clear over the coming days, but for now, she should familiarize herself with the basics. After Mrs. Chen left, Alara sat at the desk, her desk, and tried to make sense of her new reality. The computer was already logged in, display showing what appeared to be a schedule. Meetings, appointments, names she didn't recognize attached to times and locations. In 3 hours, something called East Side Collection Review. Tomorrow, warehouse inspection, Port District. The day after, mediation, Russo dispute. She clicked on the first entry. Details populated the screen, addresses, names, percentages, dollar amounts. Protection payments, she realized. Businesses paying Dante for what? Safety. Or safety from him? Her stomach turned. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, voice shakier than she wanted. Dante entered, now in shirt sleeves, tie loosened. He looked almost normal, just a businessman finishing a long day, except for his eyes. His eyes never looked normal. "Settling in?" he asked. "I don't know what I'm settling into." "Fair enough." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You start tomorrow. I'll be making rounds, collections, inspections, meeting with associates. You'll shadow me, observe, ask questions. I want you to understand how things work before you start offering opinions." "And what exactly am I supposed to do?" "Whatever needs doing." Dante's expression was unreadable. "I have people who handle muscle, people who handle money, people who handle logistics. What I don't have is someone who sees the human element, someone who can tell me when I'm being—" He paused, searching for the word. "Excessive." "You want me to be your conscience. I want you to be my mirror." He pushed off the doorframe. "The car will pick you up at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Wear something practical. We'll be visiting places that aren't as nice as this." He started to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Alara? The contract you signed has a confidentiality clause. You don't discuss what you see or hear with anyone outside this organization. Not Maya, not old friends, not a therapist. What happens here stays here." "Or what?" Dante's smile was cold. "Or you'll discover exactly how much worse than a bully I can be." Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone in her new office, surrounded by the trappings of a life she'd sold herself into, wondering what the hell she'd just done. The apartment was obscene. Penthouse, 20th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city skyline that looked like something from a postcard. Hardwood floors, kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. The bed was California King, covered in sheets with a thread count she didn't know thread could count to. Alara stood in the living room as the sun set, watching her old neighborhood disappear into the urban sprawl somewhere to the south, and felt completely untethered from reality. Her phone buzzed. "Maya. Are you okay? Where are you? I've been calling the diner and Rick said you quit. What's happening?" Alara stared at the message. The confidentiality clause echoed in her head. She couldn't tell Maya the truth, couldn't say she'd sold herself to the man who'd threatened to destroy her, couldn't explain that she was now living in a palace bought with other people's fear. She typed, "I'm fine. Got a new job. Better pay. I'll explain when I can." Maya's response came immediately. "What kind of job?" Alara turned off her phone. She walked through the apartment, opening closets and cabinets, trying to feel like this was real, like this belonged to her. But everything felt temporary, borrowed, like she was a guest in someone else's life. In the bedroom closet, she found clothes already hanging, dresses, slacks, blouses, all in her size. Mrs. Chen's efficiency was terrifying. She pulled out a simple black dress, held it up to the light. The fabric was silk, smooth as water. The tag inside said a name she recognized from magazine ads. She put it back, chose her own funeral dress instead, hung it next to the expensive ones like a reminder of who she actually was. That night, Alara lay in the too-big bed in the too-nice apartment and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from the city lights dance across unfamiliar contours. Tomorrow she would step into Dante's world for real. Tomorrow she would see what she'd actually agreed to. Tomorrow she would find out what it cost to save someone when you had to sell yourself to do it. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and haunted by dreams of her mother's face, Maya's tears, and Dante's cold smile, promising that she was finally alive. The Mercedes arrived at 7:58 a.m. Alara had been awake since 5, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar bed, in the unfamiliar apartment, in the unfamiliar life she'd woken up to. She'd tried on 4 different outfits from the closet before settling on dark slacks and a gray blouse. Professional enough to look like she belonged, plain enough that she didn't feel like a fraud. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed someone trying too hard to look put together, dark circles under her eyes betraying the sleepless night. The driver was the same man from yesterday, silent, efficient, opening the door without meeting her eyes. She slid into the back seat, and they pulled into traffic without a word exchanged. Morning light turned the city harsh and unforgiving. Rush hour crowds moved like schools of fish, everyone trying to get somewhere that mattered more than where they were. Alara watched them through tinted windows and felt the distance between her old life and this new one stretching into something vast and unbridgeable. They didn't go to the mansion. Instead, the car wound through progressively rougher neighborhoods until they reached an industrial district where the buildings wore their age like battle scars. Chain-link fences topped with razor wire, loading docks, warehouses with windows so grimy they looked like cataracts. This was the city's working bones, the parts that kept it running but nobody wanted to look at. The car stopped in front of a building that might have been a factory once. Now it was just hollow space and bad acoustics, the kind of place where sound carried in ugly ways. Dante was waiting outside, flanked by the 2 guards from the diner. In daylight, they looked even more dangerous. One was built like a concrete block, the other lean and watchful, with eyes that tracked movement like a predator's. Both wore suits that did nothing to hide the shape of weapons underneath. Alara got out of the car. The morning air smelled like diesel and something sour she couldn't identify. "You're early," Dante said. He looked different out here, less businessman, more warlord. His suit was darker, his expression harder. "Good. Shows respect." "Respect for what?" "For staying alive." He gestured to the building. "Today you learn how things actually work. Not the sanitized version, the real thing." The guards moved to flank them as they walked toward the entrance. The one built like a block, Alara heard Dante call him Marcus, pulled open a rusted metal door that screamed on its hinges. Inside, the building was exactly as abandoned as it looked from outside. Concrete floors stained with oil and time. Support beams rising into shadows. Pigeons roosting in the rafters, their cooing echoing in the empty space. Except it wasn't empty. In the center of the floor, under the weak light filtering through broken skylights, 3 men knelt with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. They were young, early 20s maybe, wearing street clothes that had seen better days. One had a split lip, blood dried down his chin. Another's eye was swelling shut. The third just stared at the floor, shoulders shaking. Standing behind them was a 4th man Alara didn't recognize. Older, 40s, with the kind of face that had seen violence and stopped being bothered by it. He held a tire iron loosely in one hand. Alara's stomach lurched. "What is this?" "Education," Dante said quietly. He walked forward, stopping a few feet from the kneeling men. These three work for Marco Vitelli. You know that name? She shook her head. Small-time dealer trying to become medium-time. Operates out of the east side, sells to high school kids mostly. I've told him 3 times to stay out of my territory. Last week, his people were working a corner 2 blocks from one of my clubs. Dante's voice was conversational, like discussing weather. These 3 were the ones doing the selling. The man with the swollen eye looked up. We didn't know, Mr. Moretti. Swear to God we didn't. You didn't ask. Dante's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the man flinch. That's worse than knowing. Means you're stupid or you think I'm soft. Either way, it's a problem. Please, man, we got families. Everyone has families. Dante turned to look at Alara. What do you think we should do with them? The question hit her like cold water. What? You're here to offer perspective, so offer it. His eyes glittered in the dim light. What's the appropriate response to someone violating clearly established boundaries? Alara's mouth went dry. The 3 men were staring at her now, hope and terror mixed on their faces. She could feel the weight of the moment, the way her answer would matter in ways she couldn't fully understand yet. Let them go, she said. They're kids. They made a mistake. They're drug dealers who knowingly worked territory they were warned away from. Dante's expression didn't change. Try again. They said they didn't know. They're lying. This from Marcus, his voice like gravel. We caught them 3 days ago, gave them a warning. They came back anyway. The man with the split lips started crying, actual tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. Vitelli said you wouldn't do nothing, said you were getting soft, that the old man's son wasn't his father. Dante moved faster than Alara thought possible. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand was wrapped around the crying man's throat, lifting him partially off his knees. What else did Vitelli say? Dante's voice was very quiet. The man choked, unable to answer with Dante's fingers crushing his windpipe. After 5 seconds, 10, Dante released him, let him drop back to the concrete gasping. Answer me. Said, the man wheezed. Said you let that waitress bitch slap you in front of everyone? Said you're weak. Said if we push, you'll fold like your old man did before they put him in the ground. The sound of Dante's fist hitting the man's face was like a branch snapping. Blood sprayed across concrete. The man went down hard, unconscious or close to it. The other 2 scrambled backward, zip ties cutting into their wrists. Dante stood over the unconscious man, breathing hard, his knuckles split and bleeding. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dante turned to the man with the tire iron. Break their hands, both of them. Make sure Vitelli sees the x-rays. Wait, Alara's voice came out strangled. You can't. I can and I will. Dante looked at her, and his eyes were completely empty. This is the world you signed up for. This is what keeping order looks like. This is torture. This is a message. He stepped closer to her, and she could smell blood on him, copper and salt. You think I want to do this? You think I enjoy it? Every act of violence I commit is calculated. These 3 go back to Vitelli with broken hands. He understands I'm serious. More importantly, everyone else on the east side understands. Which means I don't have to break 100 other hands. Violence now prevents more violence later. That's insane. That's mathematics. Dante's voice went cold. You want to save people, Alara? This is how. I break their hands today so they don't get killed tomorrow when Vitelli's stupidity starts a war that gets 50 people dead in the crossfire. The 2 conscious men were begging now, words tumbling over each other, promises, prayers, offers of money they didn't have. The man with the tire iron moved forward. Alara closed her eyes. Couldn't watch this. Couldn't be complicit in this. The first scream was high and thin, cut off abruptly by the second impact. Then the third. Fourth. The sounds of breaking bones were smaller than she expected. Not dramatic, just wet cracks like stepping on dry wood. When it was over, the silence was worse than the screaming. Alara opened her eyes. The 2 men were curled on the floor, cradling mangled hands against their chests, making sounds that weren't quite human. The third was still unconscious, blood pooling under his face. Get them medical attention, Dante said to Marcus. Make sure they survive. I want Vitelli to get the message clearly. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. Dante turned back to Ilara. Blood spattered his shirt, his knuckles still bleeding. Come on, we have more stops. She didn't move. Couldn't move. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Ilara. His voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You can leave. Right now. Walk out. Get in the car. Go back to your apartment and pretend this morning never happened. I'll tear up the contract. Maya's debt stays forgiven. You're free. Why would you do that? Because I need you to choose this. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see flecks of someone else's blood on his collar. I need you to see the worst of it and decide if you can live with it. If you can't, better to know now. Ilara's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets so he wouldn't see, but of course he saw. He saw everything. What happens to them? She asked quietly. They heal. They go back to Vitelli. They tell him what happened. Dante wiped blood from his knuckles with a handkerchief. Vitelli has a choice, back down or escalate. Most likely he backs down. He's not stupid enough to start a war he can't win. And if he doesn't, then more people get hurt until he does. Dante's expression was flat. That's how this works. Power isn't about being the strongest. It's about being willing to do what others won't. About making it clear that crossing you costs more than anyone wants to pay. Ilara looked at the broken men on the floor. Looked at Dante, blood on his hands, waiting for her decision. Looked at Marcus and the other guard, at the man with the tire iron who'd carried out the violence without hesitation or remorse. She thought about Maya's face, about the cafe that was the last piece of her grandmother's love, about the choice she'd made yesterday that had led to this moment. I'm staying, she heard herself say. Dante studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Let's go. The rest of the morning was a parade of controlled intimidation. They visited a restaurant where the owner was late on protection payments. Dante never raised his voice, never made explicit threats. He simply sat across from the terrified man and explained in careful detail how many building code violations existed in the kitchen, how the fire marshal might be interested in the blocked emergency exits, how unfortunate it would be if health inspectors found rodent droppings during a surprise visit. The owner paid. Cash. Counting it out with shaking hands while Dante smiled pleasantly. They visited a nightclub that wanted to extend operating hours past city ordinances. The owner wanted Dante's help making problems with the zoning board disappear. Dante listened, named a price that made the owner's face go pale, then cut it in half when Ilara pointed out the club employed 70 people who'd lose their jobs if it closed. Dante glanced at her after they left, something almost like approval in his eyes. Why'd you do that? Because 70 families don't deserve to suffer because their boss wants to stay open an extra 2 hours. 70 families I don't know and will never meet. But they exist. Ilara met his gaze. You said you needed someone to see the human element. That's the human element. He didn't respond, but she noticed he was quieter after that. By noon, they'd made 8 stops. Ilara's head was spinning with names and faces and the complex web of favors, debts, and threats that kept Dante's empire running. It wasn't what she'd expected. Not constant violence, but constant pressure. The threat of violence held over everything like a raised fist that didn't need to fall because everyone remembered when it had. They stopped for lunch at a restaurant that cleared out the moment Dante walked in. The owner, a woman in her 60s who called Dante Bambino and pinched his cheek, brought food without being asked. Pasta, bread, wine that probably cost more than Ilara used to make in a week. Eat, Dante said, serving himself. Afternoon's going to be longer than the morning. Ilara picked at her food. Her stomach was still churning from the warehouse. How do you do this? Do what? Live like this? Hurt people and then eat pasta like it's normal. Dante set down his fork. You want the truth or the comfortable lie? Truth. The truth is, I stopped seeing them as people a long time ago. His voice was matter-of-fact. The moment you start thinking about the dealer's family, the restaurant owner's mortgage, the individual human cost of every decision, you paralyze yourself. You become useless. So you build walls. You make yourself into something that can do what needs doing without breaking. That's monstrous. Yes. He picked up his fork again. But it's necessary. My father built this empire on those same walls. When he died, people thought I'd be softer, thought the son wouldn't have the father's stomach for the work. I spent the first 6 months proving them wrong. He met her eyes. That's why Vitelli's people calling me soft is a problem. The moment people think you're weak, they test you. And if you fail that test, everything falls apart. So you break hands to prove you're strong. I break hands so I don't have to break necks. Dante took a sip of wine. There's a hierarchy to violence. You start small. Warnings, beatings, property damage. You only escalate when you have to. Those 3 this morning, they'll heal, they'll remember. And the next time someone offers them money to work my territory, they'll remember what broken bones feel like, and they'll say no. Elara pushed her plate away. I don't know if I can do this. You're doing it right now. Dante gestured around the empty restaurant. You're sitting here eating food bought with money extracted through fear. You're wearing clothes I provided, living in an apartment I own, drawing a salary from an empire built on suffering. The question isn't whether you can do this, you already are. The question is whether you can accept that you're doing it. The words settled over her like ash. Because he was right. She'd made her choice. Everything after was just degrees of complicity. The afternoon brought them to Dante's real office. Not the mansion study, but a building downtown that looked like every other glass and steel corporate tower. They took an elevator to the 23rd floor where a receptionist greeted Dante by name and buzzed them through security doors into a suite of offices that could have belonged to any Fortune 500 company, except for the guards positioned at intervals down the hallway, and the way everyone they passed averted their eyes. Dante's office here was larger than the one at the mansion, with windows overlooking the financial district. Everything was steel and glass and ruthless efficiency. A conference table dominated one side of the room, surrounded by chairs that had never been comfortable because comfort wasn't the point. Sit, Dante said, gesturing to the table. We have a meeting in 10 minutes. What kind of meeting? Mediation. He loosened his tie, poured himself water from a crystal pitcher. 2 of my associates have a dispute. I'm going to settle it before it becomes a problem. The door opened without a knock. 2 men entered, both in their 50s, both carrying the kind of tension that comes before violence. The first was broad-shouldered, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. The second was slimmer, better dressed, with the nervous energy of someone running on cocaine or fear, or both. They sat on opposite sides of the table, didn't look at each other. Dante remained standing. Explain. The broad-shouldered one, Dante called him Sal, spoke first. He's skimming. 3 weeks. I've been noticing the numbers don't add up. Cash coming in versus cash being reported. Difference of about 15 grand. The slimmer one, Tony, exploded out of his chair. That's bullshit. You're the one been cooking the books, trying to pin it on me. Sit down. Dante's voice cut through the anger like a blade. Tony sat. Sal, you have proof? Got the ledgers? Got receipts? Got testimony from 2 of the counters who saw him pocketing cash before it got recorded. Dante turned to Tony. Your response? Tony's face had gone pale. Those counters are Sal's cousins. They're lying for him. I never touched nothing that wasn't mine. Show me the ledgers, Dante said to Sal. The next 20 minutes were brutal in their mundanity. Numbers, receipts, carefully documented evidence of theft that added up to $15,000 in change. Tony's denials got weaker as the evidence mounted. By the end, he was sweating through his expensive shirt, his leg bouncing under the table. Dante closed the ledger. You stole from me. I didn't. Don't. The word snapped like a gunshot. Don't insult me by continuing to lie when we both know the truth. Tony's composure cracked. I needed it. My kid's in trouble, got into debt with some people, bad people. They were going to hurt him. So you stole from me to save your son. Dante's voice was very quiet. That's your defense? I was going to pay it back. I swear, just needed time. You've worked for me for 12 years, Tony. 12 years. If you had a problem, you could have come to me, asked for a loan, explained the situation. Instead, you stole, lied, made Sal look incompetent for not catching it sooner. Dante walked around the table, stood behind Tony's chair. What do you think I should do? Tony was crying now, shoulders shaking. Please, please, Dante, I got nowhere else to go. Elara. Dante turned to her. What do you think? She'd been sitting silently, trying to process what she was watching. Now both men turned to look at her, Sal with calculation, Tony with desperate hope. Her mouth was dry. I don't know. Yes, you do. Dante's eyes were locked on hers. Man steals from his employer to save his son. What's the appropriate consequence? He was trying to save his kid. He was stealing. Sal's voice was hard. You let one guy steal because he's got a sad story. Everyone starts stealing. That's how you lose control. He worked for you for 12 years, Ilara said to Dante. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for why I'm asking you instead of just putting a bullet in him. Dante's voice was utterly flat. In this world, loyalty is everything. The moment someone proves they'll betray you, they're a liability. Tony betrayed me. The only question is the price of that betrayal. Ilara looked at Tony, at his tears, his shaking hands, his terror. Looked at Sal, waiting for blood. Looked at Dante, impassive, letting her decide something she had no business deciding. Make him pay it back, she said finally. Double, over time. And he works directly under Sal for the next year. No cash handling, just labor. Silence. Then Sal laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're kidding. He steals 15 grand and he gets a payment plan? He gets to keep breathing, Ilara shot back. He gets to go home to his son. He gets to earn back your trust over time instead of dying in an alley because he made one desperate choice. That's weak, Bertie. That's mercy. Ilara turned to Dante. You said you needed someone to see the human element. There it is. He's human. He made a mistake. He deserves a chance to fix it. Dante studied her for a long moment, then looked at Tony. You have 6 months to pay back $30,000. Miss one payment, and Sal gets to decide what happens to you. Understood? Tony nodded so hard his neck looked like it might snap. Yes, yes, thank you. Thank her, Dante gestured to Ilara. She just saved your life. Don't make her regret it. After Tony left, stumbling, still crying, probably still not believing he was alive, Sal lingered. Boss, he said carefully, people are going to talk about this. Let them talk. They're going to say you're going soft, that the girl's making you weak. Sal glanced at Ilara. No disrespect, but that's how it'll play. Then we'll have to make sure they understand the difference between mercy and weakness. Dante's voice went cold. Find out who Tony's son owes money to. Have a conversation. Make it clear that anyone coming after Tony or his family answers to me personally. Sal's eyebrows rose. You're protecting him? I'm protecting my investment. Tony's going to work his ass off for the next 6 months, proving he's worth the mercy he was given. And everyone watching is going to see that loyalty, even damaged loyalty, gets rewarded. Betrayal gets punished, but redemption is possible. Dante's eyes glittered. That's a more powerful message than just killing him would have been. After Sal left, Ilara and Dante sat alone in the conference room. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, turning the city outside into geometric patterns of light and shadow. You did well, Dante said finally. I just saved a man's life. You did more than that. He stood, walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. You showed everyone in this organization that I'm willing to listen to alternative perspectives, that there's someone in my inner circle who values mercy. That becomes part of the calculation now. People will think twice before doing something stupid because they'll wonder if you'll advocate for them. I'm not a prop. No, you're a tool. There's a difference. He turned to face her. But you're also right. About Tony. About giving him a chance. I wouldn't have seen that angle without you. Because you stopped seeing people as human. Because I'm too close to it. Dante's voice was quiet. When you live in this world long enough, everything becomes numbers and strategy. You forget that the numbers are attached to lives. That's dangerous. Makes you into exactly the kind of tyrant who eventually gets overthrown. So I'm here to keep you human. You're here to remind me what human looks like. He returned to the table, started gathering the ledgers. Tomorrow we have a different kind of day. Less violence, more business. Legal business, actually. I own legitimate companies. Construction, real estate, security. They need oversight, too. I didn't know you had legal operations. Most people don't. That's intentional. Dante's smile was thin. The criminal enterprise funds the legitimate businesses. The legitimate businesses launder the money and provide cover. It's a cycle. Everything feeds everything else. Alara's head was spinning again. This is so much bigger than I thought. You thought what? That I was just some street thug with a gun? Dante's voice held genuine amusement. I have an economics degree from Princeton. Spent 2 years on Wall Street before my father's death brought me home. I understand markets, leverage, risk assessment. This isn't chaos. It's architecture. Very carefully designed architecture. Architecture built on broken bones. Architecture that employs 3,000 people. Feeds their families. Keeps entire neighborhoods stable because everyone knows the rules and follows them. Dante's expression hardened. You want to judge me? Fine. But don't pretend the world you came from was clean. The restaurant where you worked paid undocumented workers under minimum wage. Your landlord hadn't fixed code violations in a decade. The pharmacy where your mother got her medication upcharged her insurance by 300%. Everyone's hands are dirty, Alara. The only difference is I'm honest about mine. The words stung because they were true. She wanted to argue, to find the moral high ground, but it had been eroding under her feet since the moment she'd signed that contract. Come on, Dante said, checking his watch. One more stop before we're done for the day. Nka. The last stop was a funeral. They drove to a cemetery on the city's north side, where old money got buried under expensive marble and carefully tended grass. The service was already underway when they arrived, a small crowd dressed in black surrounding a casket being lowered into the ground. Who died? Alara asked as they walked across the grass. Thomas Castellano. Worked for my father for 30 years. Died of cancer last week. Dante's voice was neutral. He had no family. This is everyone he knew. They stood at the back of the gathering. Alara counted maybe 20 people, most of them older, worn-looking. The kind of faces you earn through hard living. A priest was speaking, words about eternal rest and salvation that sounded hollow in the afternoon air. When the service ended, people approached Dante one by one, shook his hand, murmured condolences that sounded more like reports. He nodded, said quiet words Alara couldn't hear, handed each person an envelope before they walked away. After the last one left, Dante approached the grave, stood there for a long moment, looking down at the casket settling into earth. Alara stayed back, giving him space, but after a minute he gestured for her to join him. Thomas taught me how to fight, Dante said quietly. Not the clean kind, the dirty kind. How to hit to incapacitate, not just hurt. How to read a room for threats. How to move through the world ready for violence without broadcasting it. He paused. He also taught me chess. Used to say strategy was just violence slowed down enough to be civilized. Did you care about him? I made sure he had the best doctors money could buy. Made sure his final months were as comfortable as possible. Paid for this funeral out of my personal account, not business funds. Dante's jaw tightened. But did I visit him while he was dying? No. Did I hold his hand, tell him he mattered? No. Because people in this world who show that kind of attachment get used, get leveraged. That's a lonely way to live. It's a safe way to live. Dante turned to her. Those envelopes I handed out, $5,000 each. Enough to cover expenses, help them through the next few months. That's how I show I care. Through money, through action, not through emotion. You think that's enough? I think it's all I have. His voice was flat. You want me to feel something, Alara? I feel exhausted. I feel the weight of 3,000 people depending on me not to fuck up. I feel the pressure of knowing that every decision I make ripples out into lives I'll never see. But grief, love, those are luxuries I can't afford. They stood in silence, watching the gravediggers begin filling in the hole. The sound of dirt hitting the casket was final, absolute. The envelopes were a good thing, Alara said quietly. It was strategic, keep people loyal, show that working for me has value even after death. It was also kind. Dante looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not. I'm just seeing what you won't let yourself see. He didn't respond. Just turned and walked back toward the car, leaving her standing by the grave of a man who died alone despite spending his life surrounded by people. Alara followed. Behind them, the gravediggers worked, filling the hole, erasing the last evidence that Thomas Castellano had mattered to anyone. Gaek. That night, back in her apartment, Alara stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling of the day. Her hands still shook when she thought about the warehouse, the sound of breaking bones. Her stomach still turned when she remembered Tony's tears, the casual way Dante had almost destroyed him before she'd intervened. She got out, wrapped herself in a towel that probably cost more than her old monthly rent, and stared at her reflection. 2 days. She'd been in this world for 2 days, and already she felt changed, harder somehow, less certain of where her lines were. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Silence. Then, Alara Vance? The voice was male, unfamiliar, carrying an edge that made her skin prickle. Who is this? Someone who knows what you are now. The voice was low, controlled. You think you're helping him? You're just another tool, another way for him to pretend he's not a monster. I don't know who you are, but Dante Moretti is going to get you killed. The voice sharpened. Either by his enemies or by his own hand when you stop being useful. Get out while you can. The line went dead. Alara stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, her reflection staring back at her from the bathroom mirror with eyes that looked more hunted than human. Someone knew about her. Someone was watching, and they wanted her to know she was in danger. She thought about calling Dante, thought about telling security, but something stopped her. The memory of his voice saying confidentiality clause, the way he'd explained that attachment made you vulnerable, the cold calculation behind everything he did. If she told him, what would happen? Would he protect her? Or would he see her as compromised, a liability, something to be eliminated before it became a problem? She set the phone down with shaking hands and tried to convince herself that the voice had been wrong, that she was safe, that the choice she'd made wasn't going to destroy her. But the voice echoed in her head all night, making sleep impossible. Get out while you can. The next morning started the same. Mercedes at 8, driver silent, city rolling past outside. But something was different. Alara felt it in the air, in the way the driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror, in the increased number of guards visible when they pulled up to the downtown office building. Dante was waiting in his office, but he wasn't alone. 3 men sat around the conference table, all of them older than him, all of them carrying the kind of authority that didn't need announcement. Alara. Dante gestured her inside. We're having a strategic discussion. Sit. She took a chair at the far end of the table, acutely aware of the weight of attention on her. These men were assessing her, calculating her worth, deciding whether she was asset or liability. Gentlemen, Dante said, this is Alara Vance, my new senior advisor. Senior advisor. The title was ridiculous given she'd been here 3 days, but Alara kept her face neutral. One of the men, gray-haired with eyes like chips of ice, spoke. Advisor on what exactly? Human resources. Dante's voice was smooth. Alara has a talent for seeing angles I miss. Useful given how rapidly our situation is evolving. Evolving. The gray-haired man leaned back. That's one word for it. Vitelli's making moves. Eastern Syndicate is getting aggressive. And we're wasting time on broken hands when we should be sending bodies. Bodies start wars, Dante said calmly. Wars cost money and stability. Both things we need right now. Wars also send messages, another man interjected. This one was younger, maybe early 50s, with the kind of expensive suit that screamed new money trying to look like old. Vitelli's people are calling you soft. That story about the diner, about letting some girl slap you and walk away, it's making the rounds. People are starting to wonder if you've got the spine your father had. Alara felt her face heat. So that's what this was about. Her presence wasn't just practical, it was political. A vulnerability Dante's rivals were already exploiting. My father, Dante said, his voice going cold, died in a federal prison because he couldn't adapt to changing times. Because he thought brute force was the only kind of power that mattered. I'm still here because I'm smarter than that. You're here because of his reputation, the gray-haired man said. But reputations fade, especially when you start showing mercy to people who steal from you, letting women make decisions that should be yours. Careful. The word cut through the room like a blade. Dante's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes made the gray-haired man stop talking. You're questioning my judgment. That's your right as a senior associate, but question my strength again, and we're going to have a different kind of conversation." Silence settled over the table, thick and dangerous. The younger man cleared his throat. "What Marco's trying to say is that optics matter. How you're perceived affects all of us. If you're seen as weak, our rivals get bold, our allies get nervous, everything gets unstable." "Then help me with the optics," Dante said. Alara advocated for mercy with Tony. That mercy came with conditions: triple the debt, a year of supervised work, and personal protection from whoever his son owed money to. Tony's more loyal now than if I'd just killed him. And everyone who heard about it knows I'm willing to invest in redemption, which makes them think twice before betraying me in the first place. The men exchanged glances. The third one, who hadn't spoken yet, finally did. "It's an interesting strategy. Untested in our context, but interesting." "I'm not looking for interesting," the gray-haired man, Marco, said. "I'm looking for effective. And what's effective is showing Vitelli that his people end up in the ground, not in physical therapy." Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear exactly, but something close. He stood. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this later. Something's come up that requires immediate attention." The dismissal was clear. The three men stood, filed out with varying expressions of skepticism and concern. Marco paused at the door, looked back at Alara. "You're going to get him killed," he said quietly. Then he was gone. Dante was already on his phone, speaking in rapid, clipped sentences. Alara caught fragments. "How many? When? Containment protocol. No, I'm handling it personally." He ended the call, looked at Alara. "We need to go. Now." "What's happening?" Vitelli's response to this morning. Dante's jaw was tight. He didn't back down. He escalated. They moved through the building at a pace just short of running, guards materializing from nowhere to form a protective circle, into the elevator, down to the parking garage, into an SUV that was armored. Alara could tell by the weight of the doors, the thickness of the glass. Marcus was driving, the other guard in the passenger seat. Both had guns visible now, no pretense of concealment. "Talk to me," Dante said to Marcus. "Vitelli hit the warehouse on Pier 17. 6 of our people inside. Reports of gunfire, casualties unknown." Marcus took a corner hard enough to make the tires squeal. "Emergency services aren't responding. Someone's got the cops sitting on their hands." Dante cursed under his breath. "How bad?" "Won't know until we get there." Alara's heart was hammering. This was real. This was what happened when strategic calculations failed, when messages didn't land the way they were supposed to. People got shot. People died. "You shouldn't have come," Dante said, not looking at her. "This is going to be bad." "Then why am I here?" "Because I can't send you back alone. Not safe." He was typing on his phone, sending messages, coordinating. "Stay in the vehicle when we arrive. Don't get out no matter what you see. Understood?" Alara nodded, though she knew he wasn't really asking. The Pier District was industrial wasteland, abandoned buildings, rusted equipment, water that smelled like chemicals and rot. Marcus pulled up to a warehouse with a roll-up door half open, smoke visible inside. Bodies on the ground. Alara saw them through the windshield. 3, maybe 4, sprawled in positions that only made sense if they were dead. Dante was out before the SUV fully stopped, gun in hand that had appeared from somewhere. Marcus and the other guard flanked him immediately, all three moving with coordinated precision toward the warehouse entrance. Alara watched from the vehicle, her breath fogging the armored glass. More guards were arriving, SUVs pulling up, men pouring out with weapons drawn. This wasn't a small operation. This was war mobilization. Then she saw movement in the warehouse, a figure stumbling out through the smoke, one of Dante's people, clutching his side where blood was spreading through his shirt. He made it 3 steps before collapsing. Dante ran to him, kneeling, checking for pulse, barking orders. Medical kit appeared from somewhere, people working on the wounded man with the efficiency of combat training. Alara's hands were pressed against the glass, helpless. This was her fault, wasn't it? The voice on the phone had been right. She'd made Dante soft, made him show mercy, and now people were dying because Vitelli saw weakness. Marcus appeared at Dante's side, speaking urgently. Dante's expression went dark. He stood, looked back at the SUV where Alara sat. Their eyes met across the distance. Then Dante turned and walked into the warehouse. The next 5 minutes were the longest of Alara's life. She watched guards take positions, watched more wounded being carried out, watched the organized chaos of men trained for violence executing their protocols. When Dante emerged, his shirt was covered in blood that wasn't his. His face was set in lines of pure rage. He walked directly to the SUV, pulled open the door. "How many?" Alara asked. "3 dead, 4 wounded." His voice was utterly flat. Vitelli's people came in fast, professional. This wasn't retaliation, it was a statement. What kind of statement? That mercy is weakness, that I'm compromised. He looked at her. "They left a message, spray painted on the wall. The bitch made you soft." Alara's stomach dropped. "This is my fault." "No." Dante's voice was sharp. "This is Vitelli being an idiot, but it's also a problem we now have to solve." He slammed the door, walked around to the other side, got in beside her. "Marcus, take us back to the mansion. Full security protocols." "What are you going to do?" Alara asked. Dante didn't answer immediately. He stared straight ahead, jaw working, something terrible building behind his eyes. "What I should have done from the beginning," he said finally. "I'm going to end this." The way he said it, cold, absolute, final, made Alara understand that the violence she'd seen so far had just been foreplay. Now came the real thing, and she was going to have to watch. The SUV pulled away from the pier, leaving the bodies and the blood and the smoke behind. But Alara could still smell it, still see it, still hear the voice on the phone warning her this would happen. "You're going to get him killed." Or maybe, she thought, staring at Dante's blood-covered hands, he was going to get her killed first. Either way, there was no going back now. The point of no return had arrived, and Alara was standing right in the middle. The mansion felt different when they returned, not safer, but fortified, like a castle preparing for siege. Guards doubled at every entrance, weapons no longer concealed but carried openly. The windows that had seemed merely expensive yesterday now revealed themselves as bulletproof, reinforced with steel frames Alara hadn't noticed before. This wasn't a home. It was a bunker disguised as wealth. Dante disappeared the moment they arrived, leaving Alara standing in the marble foyer with blood still visible on her hands from when she'd touched the SUV door. Mrs. Chen appeared like a ghost, her expression unchanged despite the chaos, and led Alara to her office without a word. "Wait here," the older woman said. "Don't leave this room until you're told otherwise." "What's happening?" Mrs. Chen's eyes, usually so empty of emotion, showed something that might have been pity. "War," she said simply. Then she closed the door, and Alara heard the lock click from outside. Locked in. She was locked in. Alara tried the handle anyway, knowing it was pointless. The wood was solid, probably reinforced like everything else in this building. She pressed her forehead against it, breathing hard, fighting the panic rising in her chest. 3 people were dead, 4 wounded. Because Vitelli thought Dante was weak, because she'd convinced him to show mercy instead of strength, because she'd believed there was a better way to do things. The voice on the phone had been right. She was going to get him killed, or get herself killed, or both. Hours crawled past. Alara paced the office, sat at the desk, stood at the windows looking out at gardens that seemed obscenely peaceful while men were dying in warehouses across the city. She tried the door twice more. Still locked. Night fell. No one came. She was starting to think she'd been forgotten when the lock finally turned. The door opened, and Marcus stood there, his suit jacket gone, shoulder holster visible, his face carved from granite. "Boss wants you," he said. "Where is he?" "Basement. Come on." Basement. The word landed wrong in Alara's stomach. Nothing good happened in basements. She followed Marcus through the mansion, down hallways she hadn't seen before, past rooms with closed doors, and the muffled sound of voices planning violence. They descended stairs. Not the grand staircase she'd used before, but a narrow service stairwell with concrete walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed like insects. The basement was finished but sparse. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, the utilitarian bones of the building laid bare. Marcus led her through a corridor lined with storage rooms until they reached a steel door with a keypad lock. He punched in a code, pulled it open. The room beyond looked like an interrogation cell. Concrete walls. A single metal chair bolted to the floor in the center. Drain in the corner. And tied to the chair, bloodied and barely conscious, was a man Alara had never seen before. Dante stood against the far wall, sleeves rolled up, knuckles split and bleeding again. Two other guards flanked the room, watching the tied man with the flat attention of people waiting for orders. "Close the door," Dante said without looking at Alara. Marcus did, the sound echoing in the small space. Alara's heart was trying to hammer through her ribs. "What is this?" "Education." Dante pushed off the wall, walked to stand behind the tied man. "This is Vincent Caruso, works for Vitelli, or did, until we picked him up an hour ago. He was one of the shooters at the warehouse." Vincent's head lolled forward, blood dripping from his nose onto his lap. He was young, maybe 30, with the kind of build that came from gym time, not real violence. His left eye was swollen shut, his lips split, his breathing shallow. "Why am I here?" Alara asked, though she was starting to understand. "Because you need to see what happens when mercy fails." Dante grabbed Vincent's hair, yanked his head back. The man groaned, tried to focus his one working eye. "Vincent's going to tell us everything he knows about Vitelli's operation, where he keeps his money, where he sleeps, who his suppliers are, every detail." "I already told you." Vincent's voice was thick with blood. "I don't know nothing." Dante's fist crashed into his face. The sound was wet, final. Vincent's head snapped to the side, more blood spattering onto concrete. Alara flinched. "Stop! He killed 3 of my people." Dante's voice was utterly empty. "Shot them execution style while they begged. You want me to stop? This is torture. This is information extraction." Dante circled the chair, his movements predatory. "Vincent has a choice. Talk now and die quick. Or don't talk and die slow. Either way, he dies. The only variable is how much he suffers first." Vincent was crying now, tears mixing with blood on his ruined face. "Please, man, I got a wife. Everyone has someone." Dante crouched in front of him, eye level. "Your wife's name is Jennifer. You have a daughter, Sophia, age 4. They live in a house you can't afford, in a neighborhood you don't belong in because you're trying to give them a better life. I respect that, I do." Hope flickered in Vincent's swollen eye. Dante's voice went cold. "But they don't matter to me. You made a choice when you walked into my warehouse with a gun. Now you live with the consequences." He stood, pulled a knife from his pocket. Not large, but functional, the blade catching the fluorescent light. Vincent saw it and started thrashing against his restraints, panic overriding pain. "No, no, no, please God, please." Dante looked at Alara. "Leave if you want. I won't force you to watch this." She should leave. Should run back upstairs, lock herself in her office, pretend this wasn't happening. But her feet wouldn't move, because if she left now, she was complicit anyway. And if she stayed, maybe she could stop this before it went too far. "There has to be another way," she said. "There isn't." Dante turned the knife in his hand, testing its weight. "This is the world you joined. This is what it costs to maintain order. Vincent and his friends broke that order. This is the price." "You're better than this." "No." The word was sharp as the blade. "I'm exactly this. You're the one who keeps pretending I'm something else." He moved behind Vincent, grabbed his hand, the right one. Fingers splayed on the chair arm. Vincent was screaming now, incoherent, animal sounds of pure terror. "Last chance," Dante said quietly. "Tell me what I want to know." "I can't. He'll kill my family. He'll kill everyone. I'll kill them too if you don't talk." Dante positioned the knife above Vincent's pinky finger. "But at least you won't be alive to see it." Alara's vision was narrowing, her breath coming in short gasps. This was real. This was actually happening, and she couldn't stop it because she had no power here, no leverage, nothing but her voice, and Dante had already made clear he wasn't listening. The knife started to descend. "Wait!" Vincent's scream filled the room. "Wait, wait, wait, I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. Just please." Dante paused. "Everything?" "Yes, everything. Warehouse location, suppliers, who's on the payroll, all of it." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. "Just don't hurt my family, please. They don't know nothing about this." Dante straightened, lowered the knife, looked at one of the guards. "Record this." The guard pulled out a phone, started filming. For the next 20 minutes, Vincent talked. Addresses, names, numbers, the complete architecture of Vitelli's operation spilling out in a torrent of self-preservation. Dante listened without expression, occasionally asking questions, building a mental map of his enemy's empire. When Vincent finally ran out of words, Dante nodded to the guard. "Verify everything he said. I want confirmation within 3 hours." "And him?" The guard gestured to Vincent. Alara's stomach clenched. "You said if he talked, he'd die quick." "I did." Dante's voice was flat. He turned to Vincent, who was slumped in the chair, the adrenaline draining away and leaving only exhaustion and terror. "You have family. I'm going to give you something Vitelli wouldn't." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Arrange transport, one-way tickets, tonight." Pause. "Mexico, somewhere small." Another pause. "Whatever it costs." He ended the call, looked at Vincent. "You, your wife, your daughter, you're leaving. Tonight. New identities, enough money to start over. You don't come back. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You disappear completely." Vincent stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "You're letting me go? I'm exiling you." Dante's expression was unreadable. "You gave me what I needed. I'm giving you a chance to be a father instead of a corpse. But if I ever see you again, if you ever set foot in this city again, the deal's off. Understood?" "Yes. Yes, oh God, yes. Get him cleaned up," Dante said to the guards. "Medical attention, then straight to the airport. I want confirmation when they land." The guards cut Vincent free, hauled him to his feet. He was still crying, but different now, relief instead of terror. They half-carried him out of the room, leaving Alara and Dante alone in the blood-spattered space. Silence settled like dust. "You were going to cut off his fingers," Alara said finally. "Yes." "But you didn't." "Because he talked." Dante wiped the knife on his pants, folded it, put it back in his pocket. "Fear is a tool. You have to be willing to use it, but you also have to know when you've gotten what you need. You're sending him away, with his family. I'm eliminating a threat while demonstrating that cooperation has value." Dante's voice was mechanical, like he was explaining basic math. "Vincent talks to Vitelli's other people. Word spreads that I'm ruthless but fair. That betrayal gets punished, but cooperation gets rewarded. More people flip. Vitelli's organization crumbles from the inside." "You planned this." "I planned for every contingency." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "You think I enjoy this, scaring a man until he pisses himself, threatening his child? This is necessity, not pleasure." "There's a difference?" "There has to be." Dante's jaw tightened. "The moment I start enjoying it, I become the monster everyone thinks I am. The moment I stop doing it, I become the corpse everyone's waiting for. So I live in the space between, and I do what keeps everyone alive." He opened the door, gestured for her to precede him. Alara walked out on legs that felt disconnected from her body, her mind still trapped in that room with the blood and the screaming and the terrible clarity that this was who Dante actually was when the mask came off. They climbed back upstairs in silence. The mansion was quieter now. The frenetic energy from earlier settled into grim purpose. People moved through hallways with weapons and phones, executing whatever plan Dante had set in motion. He led her to his study, the one she'd first been interviewed in, and closed the door behind them. Poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one, handed her one anyway. "Drink." Alara took it. The liquid burned going down, harsh and medicinal. She drank it anyway. Dante stood at the windows, looking out at darkness. "Tomorrow, we end this. I have Vitelli's locations, his supply chain, his weak points. By this time tomorrow, his operation won't exist." "How many people will die?" "Fewer than if we let this drag on." He finished his drink, poured another. "War is expensive. Quick wars are cheaper than slow ones. You're talking about human lives like they're accounting entries." "Because that's what they become in my position." He turned to face her. "You think I don't know their names, their faces? You think I sleep well knowing that my decisions determine who lives and who doesn't? But someone has to make those decisions. Someone has to do the math and choose the option that kills the fewest people, even if it means blood on their hands. And you chose yourself for that role. My father chose me. I just didn't refuse." Dante's voice went quiet. "When he died, I could have walked away." sold everything to the highest bidder, taken the money, disappeared. But you know what would have happened? The empire would have fractured, dozens of smaller operators fighting for control. The violence would have been catastrophic, thousands dead instead of dozens. So I stayed, and I learned, and I became what was necessary. Elara set down her glass with shaking hands. I don't know if I can do this. You already are. I mean, long term. I don't know if I can live in a world where torture is strategy and exile is mercy. Then leave. Dante's expression was unreadable. I told you from the beginning, you can walk away any time. Maya's debt stays forgiven. You keep everything I've given you, just walk out and don't come back. The offer hung between them, tempting and terrible. Elara could leave, right now. Pack her things, disappear into the night, return to her small life and try to forget any of this happened. Except she'd never forget. The warehouse, the basement, Vincent's screams, the casual way Dante had threatened a child to extract information. It was all burned into her memory now, permanent. If I leave, she said slowly, what happens to you? I continue, like I always have. Alone. I'm always alone. Dante's voice was flat. That's the price of power. You can have loyalty, fear, respect, but not connection. Not real connection. The moment you let someone matter, they become a liability. Is that what I am? A liability? He didn't answer immediately, just looked at her with those slate gray eyes that gave nothing away. You're a problem I can't solve, he said finally. You make me question decisions I've already made. You inject doubt into processes that need certainty. You remind me of all the things I had to kill in myself to survive this world. Then why keep me? Because maybe I'm tired of survival. The admission came out quiet, almost unwilling. Maybe I want to see if there's something else, something better. And you're the only person in 20 years who's looked at me and seen a human being instead of a threat or a resource. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling out into silence. Elara's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, unknown number again. Her stomach clenched. Don't answer that, Dante said sharply. Too late. Her thumb had already hit accept, muscle memory overriding thought. Hello? Elara. The same voice from before, low and controlled. You're still there. I was hoping you'd have more sense. Who are you? Someone who knows what's coming. Dante's planning to hit Vitelli's operations tomorrow. Full assault. You know how many people will die? Elara's eyes went to Dante, who was watching her with sudden intensity. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who told Vitelli where Dante keeps his money, where he sleeps, where his weaknesses are. The voice paused. You, specifically, you're the weakness everyone's been looking for. Ice flooded Elara's veins. What? Check the news. Happening right now. The line went dead. Dante was already moving, pulling out his own phone, fingers flying across the screen. His face went pale, actually pale, color draining like someone had opened a vein. No. The word was barely a whisper. What? What's happening? He turned his phone to show her. News alert. Breaking. Multiple explosions across the city. Addresses she recognized from the files she'd been reading. Dante's legitimate businesses. The construction company. The real estate office. The security firm headquarters. All of them burning. He hit us first, Dante said, his voice hollow. While we were planning to hit him, he was already moving. Vincent was a plant. Everything he told us. It was what Vitelli wanted us to know, to make us think we had the advantage while he burned our infrastructure. The phone in Elara's hand suddenly felt radioactive. The person who called me, they said they told Vitelli everything. Dante's eyes snapped to hers. What person? Someone's been calling me since the second day, warning me to leave. I thought they were trying to help. You've been receiving calls from an unknown number and you didn't tell me? Dante's voice went deadly quiet. How many times? 3? 4? I don't know. Let me see your phone. She handed it over with trembling fingers. Dante pulled up the call log, his expression darkening with each second. These calls were placed from inside this building, he said, from a secure line, which means the door exploded inward. Not literally. No bomb, no gunfire. But Marcus came through it like violence incarnate, his gun drawn, his face carved from pure fury. "We have a problem," he said. "Big one." "I know about the fires." "Not that." Marcus's eyes flicked to Alara, then back to Dante. "We just pulled surveillance from the basement, from when you were interrogating Vincent. Someone was streaming it. Live feed going out to an encrypted server." Dante went very still. "Who?" "We're tracking it now, but boss..." Marcus's jaw tightened. "The angle of the camera, it was from her position." Both men turned to look at Alara. "What?" Her voice came out strangled. I don't even have a camera." "Your phone." Dante's voice was ice. "Give it back to me." She'd already given it to him. He turned it over, examining it with hands that had started shaking. Not fear, but rage barely contained. He found something on the back, a tiny modification she'd never noticed, and his face went absolutely empty. "This phone was provided by my organization," he said quietly, "which means someone inside modified it. Someone who wanted Vitelli to see exactly how I operate, who wanted to expose my methods, who wanted to make me look like a monster." "Dante, I swear I didn't know that." "Of course you didn't." He looked at Marcus. "Find out who provisioned this device. Trace every hand it passed through from procurement to delivery. I want names in 10 minutes. Marcus disappeared. Alara felt the walls closing in. "You have to believe me. I didn't know. I would never..." "I know." Dante's voice was strangely gentle. "You're not smart enough to run this kind of operation, which means you're a pawn. Someone's using you to get to me." "Who?" "I don't..." Dante stopped. His eyes went distant, making connections Alara couldn't see. The calls, the timing, the modified phone. Someone who knew exactly when to strike, who had access to secure lines, who understood our protocols well enough to subvert them. His phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Talk." Whatever he heard made his face go hard as stone. He ended the call, looked at Alara with something that might have been regret. "It was Marco," he said quietly. "My senior associate. The one who questioned your presence from the beginning. He's been feeding information to Vitelli for 6 months, building a case that I'd gone soft, that I was compromised, that I needed to be replaced." "Replaced by who?" "By him." Dante's laugh was bitter. "He spent 20 years working for my father, thought he'd earned the right to run things when the old man died. Instead, the empire went to me, the son he considered weak, unprepared, too educated and not brutal enough. So he decided to prove it, used you as evidence that I'd lost my edge." Alara's mind was reeling. The warehouse attack, the fires, all of it was Marco. Dante walked to his desk, pulled open a drawer, removed a gun, started checking the chamber with mechanical precision. He gave Vitelli my locations, probably promised him a partnership once I was dead. 2 empires merged, Marco at the head. Clean, profitable, efficient. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done months ago." Dante's voice was empty of everything except purpose. "I'm going to end this. Marco, Vitelli. Everyone who thought they could use you as a weapon against me." "Where is he?" "Probably already gone. He's smart enough to run once the fire started, but he made one mistake." Dante's eyes glittered. He underestimated how far I'd go to protect what's mine. The possessiveness in that last word made Alara's breath catch. "I'm not yours," she said. "Yes, you are." Dante crossed the room, stood close enough that she could smell gunpowder and whiskey on him. "The moment you signed that contract, the moment you chose to stay, the moment you convinced me that mercy was possible, you became mine. And people who threaten what's mine don't get to keep breathing." He turned to leave. Alara grabbed his arm. "Don't do this. Don't go out there and start a war." "The war already started. I'm just finishing it." He pulled free gently but firmly. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Marcus. Understood?" "Dante." "Alara." He cupped her face with his free hand, the gesture shockingly tender from someone who'd been threatening amputation an hour ago. "I know you think I'm a monster. You're probably right, but I'm a monster who keeps you safe. So trust me to do that, even if you can't trust anything else." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with terrible finality. Alara stood alone in the study, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened windows. Outside, the city was burning. Inside, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pulled out her laptop, her own, not one provided by Dante's organization, and pulled up the news. The fires were everywhere, 7 buildings, casualties unknown. The financial district on lockdown. Police overwhelmed, firefighters stretched beyond capacity. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. This time she didn't answer, just stared at it until it stopped. It rang again immediately. On the 3rd ring she answered, "What do you want?" "To warn you one last time." Marco's voice. She recognized it now, that edge of controlled authority she'd heard in the conference room. "Dante's going after Vitelli tonight. He's going to walk into a trap, and you're the bait." "What are you talking about?" "Vitelli has the mansion surrounded. 40 men, professional killers. They're waiting for Dante to leave so they can come in and take you. Use you as leverage to force him into surrender." Marco's voice was almost sympathetic. "You were always the endgame, Alara, the weakness we created in him, the crack in his armor. You used me. I gave you an opportunity, good pay, new life, purpose. You chose to take it. What happens next is on you. You're going to kill him. I'm going to replace a tyrant with someone more reasonable, someone who understands that this business requires pragmatism, not principles. Dante's too much like his father, brutal, yes, but also sentimental, attached to outdated codes about family, loyalty, honor. I'm going to modernize the operation by murdering him, by allowing Vitelli to do it. Then I eliminate Vitelli and consolidate power, clean, efficient, minimal bloodshed." Marco paused. "You can survive this, Alara. When they come for you, don't fight, cooperate. Let them take you to Vitelli. When it's over, I'll make sure you're released unharmed." "And I'm supposed to trust you? You don't have another choice." His voice hardened. "They're coming in 5 minutes. Hide, fight, run. It won't matter. You're surrounded, so make the smart play. Survive. Everything else is just ego." The line went dead. Alara stood in the study, her mind racing. 5 minutes, 40 men, professional killers. She could lock the door like Dante said, could hide, hope his security held, pray he came back in time. Or she could run, find another way out, disappear into the city before they breached the mansion. Or, and this was the option that terrified her most, she could do what Marco said, cooperate. Let herself be taken, become the bait that would either save Dante or destroy him. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. This was it. The moment where every choice led to catastrophe, where survival meant betrayal and loyalty meant death. She thought about Dante's face when he'd cupped her cheek, the gentleness in that gesture from hands that had broken men. She thought about the warehouse, the bodies, the blood. She thought about Vincent and his family, somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico by now, starting a new life because Dante had chosen exile over execution. She thought about Maya, safe in her cafe, unaware that her best friend had sold herself to save her. 3 minutes. Alara ran to the desk, pulled out paper and pen, started writing. Her hand cramped, but she kept going, getting everything down. Marco's betrayal, Vitelli's attack, the truth about what was happening. If she died tonight, someone needed to know. She sealed it in an envelope, wrote Dante's name on it, left it in the center of the desk where it couldn't be missed. 2 minutes. She could hear sounds now, movement outside the mansion. Vehicles. Voices speaking in controlled whispers. The security perimeter being breached with professional precision. 1 minute. Alara walked to the door, put her hand on the lock, took a breath that felt like it might be her last as a free person, and made her choice. She unlocked the door, stepped into the hallway, and waited for them to come. The first man appeared at the end of the corridor, masked, armed, moving with tactical precision. He saw her standing there, alone, unarmed, and gestured to someone behind him. More men poured into the hallway. 6, 8, 10, all of them armed, all of them focused on her with the single-minded intensity of people following orders. The lead man approached slowly, gun raised but not aimed. "Alara Vance?" She nodded, unable to speak. "You're coming with us. Don't fight, don't scream, don't run. Cooperate and you won't be harmed." The same words Marco had used, as if they'd been scripted, as if she'd been predicted. They surrounded her, professional, efficient, no unnecessary force. Someone zip-tied her hands behind her back. Someone else placed a hood over her head, plunging her into darkness. She felt hands guiding her forward, heard the sounds of the mansion around her, shouts, gunfire in the distance, the organized chaos of an operation in progress. Then cold night air on her skin, a vehicle door opening, being pushed inside. The door slamming shut, the engine starting. And through the hood, through the fear, through the terrible certainty that she'd just made the worst decision of her life, Elara heard her own voice in her head, calm and clear. This is what it costs to save someone when you have to sacrifice yourself to do it. The vehicle pulled away from the mansion, carrying her into darkness, into whatever hell Vitelli had prepared, into the absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. And somewhere behind her, Dante was walking into a trap designed to destroy him. All because she'd chosen to matter to him. All because mercy looked like weakness to people who'd forgotten what it meant to be human. The hood smelled like someone else's fear. Elara closed her eyes beneath it and tried to prepare herself for what came next. But there was no preparing for this. There was only the choice she'd made, and the price she'd have to pay for making it. The hood came off in a warehouse that smelled like rust and old blood. Elara's eyes took a moment to adjust. Not to darkness, but to the harsh industrial lighting that turned everything the color of bone. The space was vast, empty except for support columns rising into shadows, and the kind of silence that came from concrete walls absorbing sound. Her hands were still zip-tied behind her back, cutting circulation, making her fingers tingle and go numb. 6 men surrounded her. The masks were off now, revealing faces she didn't recognize. Hard men with the kind of scars you earned through violence, not accidents. They'd positioned her in the center of the floor, a metal chair behind her. One of them pushed her into it roughly, and she felt the cold steel through her clothes. Comfortable? The voice came from behind her, followed by footsteps echoing across concrete. Elara twisted to look. A man emerged from the shadows. Late 40s, expensive suit that didn't match the warehouse setting, with the kind of face that had been handsome once before cruelty reshaped it into something else. His eyes were dark, calculating, taking her measure the way you'd assess livestock. Marco Vitelli. Had to be. "You're smaller than I expected," he said, circling her slowly. Dante Moretti's great weakness. The woman who made him soft. I thought you'd be more impressive. Sorry to disappoint. Elara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Vitelli laughed, short, sharp, utterly without humor. You've got spine. I respect that. Moretti always did have good taste. He stopped in front of her, crouched down to eye level. You know why you're here? Bait. Smart girl. He stood, gestured to one of his men. Get her phone. The new one. One of the guards approached with a device Elara had never seen before. Sleek, expensive, definitely not from Dante's organization. He held it up, and she saw her own face reflected in the black screen. We're going to make a call, Vitelli said. You're going to tell Dante exactly where you are. You're going to beg him to come save you, and when he does, Vitelli's smile was all teeth. He walks into 40 guns waiting to tear him apart. He won't come. The lie felt thin even as she said it. Yes, he will. Vitelli pulled out his own phone, pulled up something, showed her the screen. Security footage from the mansion, Dante's study, the envelope she'd left on the desk. Timestamp showed 15 minutes ago. He found your note. Read it. Then he put half the city on lockdown trying to find you. Man's in love, even if he's too damaged to admit it. The words hit harder than Elara wanted to acknowledge. You don't know that. I know men. I know power. And I know that the moment someone like Dante Moretti lets someone matter, really matter, they become the weakness that destroys him. Vitelli pocketed his phone. Your boyfriend's been systematically dismantling my operation for 6 months, taking my territory, corrupting my suppliers, turning my people against me, all because I had the audacity to exist in his city. Well, tonight that ends. Marco set you up, Elara said. He's using you to eliminate Dante so he can take over both empires. You're a tool, same as me. Vitelli's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or calculation. Marco and I have an understanding. Marco has an understanding with whoever's useful until they're not. Alara leaned forward as much as the zip ties allowed. You really think he's going to let you live once Dante's dead? You're a loose end, a witness. The moment you serve your purpose, you're gone. Shut her up, Vitelli snapped. One of the guards grabbed Alara's hair, yanked her head back. She gasped, eyes watering, but kept talking through the pain. He played you, same way he played me. Used us both to get what he wants. The slap snapped her head to the side, her cheek exploding in pain. Blood filled her mouth where her teeth cut the inside of her lip. The guard released her hair, and she slumped forward, breathing hard. Make the call, Vitelli said, his voice flat, or this gets much worse. Alara spat blood onto the concrete. No. Vitelli studied her for a long moment, then nodded to one of his men, a broad-shouldered brute with hands like cinder blocks. Break her fingers, one at a time, until she cooperates. The brute moved forward, pulling out pliers from his jacket. Alara's stomach lurched, her mind flashing back to the basement, to Vincent's screams, to the casual violence Dante had threatened. Except this time she was Vincent. This time there was no one to stop it. The brute grabbed her right hand, forced her fingers straight, despite the zip ties cutting into her wrists. She felt the cold metal of the pliers against her pinky finger, the pressure building. Wait! The word burst out before she could stop it. Wait, I'll do it. Vitelli raised his hand. The brute paused, pliers still in position. Smart choice, Vitelli said. He gestured to the man with the phone. Put it on speaker. No tricks, no codes, no warnings. Just tell him where you are and that you need him. Understood? Alara nodded, her throat tight. The guard held the phone up, dialed a number from memory. It rang once, twice. Then Dante's voice, raw and urgent. Where is she? She's here, Vitelli said, almost pleasant. Safe, for now. Want to talk to her? Silence on the other end, then, if you've hurt her, not yet, but that's negotiable. Vitelli nodded to the guard holding Alara's hand. The pliers tightened slightly, pressure increasing. She whimpered despite herself. Alara? Dante's voice cracked. Talk to me. Her voice broke. She swallowed, tried again. I'm okay. The explosion cut off her words. Not close, somewhere outside, distant enough that the sound came delayed, but massive enough to shake the warehouse. Dust rained from the ceiling, the lights flickered. Every man in the room turned toward the sound, weapons drawn, suddenly uncertain. Vitelli grabbed the phone. What the hell was that? Your west perimeter. Dante's voice came through, utterly calm now. Just eliminated. You have 38 men left. Well, 36. The two on the roof just went down. Another explosion. Closer. The warehouse shook harder this time. East perimeter, Dante continued, still calm, still controlled. 34 men. Vitelli's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Gunfire erupted outside. Automatic weapons, controlled bursts, the sound of tactical assault. I brought 60 people. Military trained, better armed than your street thugs. And they have one order, get her back. Everything else is secondary. You come in here, she dies first. Then you die second. Dante's voice went cold as a grave. Followed by everyone you've ever cared about. I will burn your entire bloodline to ash, Vitelli, your cousins in Jersey, your sister in Florida, that nephew you put through college, all of them. Because if she dies, I have nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Not bombs, shaped charges, precise, military grade. The metal twisted and screamed, peeling back like aluminum foil. Smoke poured through the opening, then gunfire, controlled, disciplined, each shot finding a target. Vitelli's men scattered, returning fire, but they were street fighters trying to match tactical operators. The difference was immediate and brutal. Bodies started dropping. Move her, Vitelli screamed, already running toward a back exit. Two guards grabbed Alara, hauled her out of the chair, started dragging her deeper into the warehouse. She fought, thrashing against the zip ties, but they were too strong. One of them slammed her against a support column, his forearm across her throat. Stop moving or I break your neck. Alara went still, her vision darkening at the edges as pressure cut off her air. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw figures moving, black tactical gear, night vision, moving through Vitelli's people like sharks through a school of fish. Professional, ruthless, unstoppable. Dante's people. The guard holding her cursed, shifted his grip, and Alara felt something cold press against her temple. Gun. He was going to use her as a shield. Then his head snapped back, a red mist spraying from where his forehead had been. He dropped without a sound, and Alara fell with him, unable to catch herself with her hands still bound. She hit concrete hard, her shoulder exploding in pain, rolled, looked up. Marcus stood 10 feet away, rifle still raised, already scanning for the next target. His face was spattered with blood that wasn't his expression carved from pure focus. "Stay down!" he barked at her, then moved forward into the firefight. Alara tried to push herself up, but her bound hands made it impossible. She was trapped on the floor, surrounded by violence, unable to do anything but survive. A body fell next to her, one of Vitelli's men, chest torn open by bullets. She flinched away, tasted bile, forced it down. Not the time to fall apart. Not yet. "Alara!" Dante's voice cutting through the gunfire. She turned her head, saw him moving through the smoke like something out of a nightmare, gun in each hand, face splattered with blood, eyes locked on her with an intensity that was almost physical. He reached her in seconds, dropped to his knees, holstered one gun, and pulled out a knife to cut the zip ties. The plastic parted, and blood rushed back into her hands in a wave of pins and needles. She gasped, tried to flex her fingers. Dante cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "Are you hurt?" "I don't—" She couldn't think straight. "I don't think so." "Can you walk?" "Yes." He pulled her to her feet, positioned himself between her and the ongoing firefight. "Marcus, I have her." Marcus appeared from the smoke, providing cover as they moved toward the blown-open entrance. Bodies littered the floor, most in civilian clothes, Vitelli's people, but some in tactical gear. The cost of getting her back measured in corpses. They were almost to the exit when Vitelli stepped out from behind a support column, gun raised, aimed directly at Alara's chest. "Stop!" His voice was steady despite the chaos. "Or she dies right now." Dante froze. Marcus's rifle swung toward Vitelli, but the angle was wrong. Alara was in the line of fire. "Drop the guns," Vitelli said. "Both of you, or I pull this trigger." Dante's jaw tightened. For a moment, Alara thought he might do it anyway, might gamble that Vitelli would miss, that he could take the shot first. But then he slowly lowered his weapons, set them on the floor. Marcus didn't move. "Him too," Vitelli said. "Marcus," Dante's voice was quiet. "Do it." Marcus hesitated, then set his rifle down, hands raised. Vitelli smiled, triumph and relief mixed. "Smart. Now back away from her." Dante didn't move. "You can't win this. My people control the entire building. You're surrounded. But I have her." Vitelli's gun didn't waver, which means I have leverage. "We're going to walk out of here. You're going to call off your dogs. And then we're going to have a conversation about territory and respect and how this city gets divided going forward." "You're delusional," Dante said flatly. "You attacked my home, took someone under my protection. There's no negotiation. There's just you dying. The only question is how painful I make it." "Big talk from a man with no gun." Vitelli's finger tightened on the trigger. "Last chance. Call them off or watch her." Alara moved, not away from the gun, toward it. Her body acted on pure instinct, muscle memory from self-defense classes she'd taken years ago and never thought she'd use. She grabbed Vitelli's wrist, twisted, forced the gun up and away from her chest. The shot went wild, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Then Dante was there, closing the distance in a blur, his fist connecting with Vitelli's face with enough force to snap his head back. The gun fell. Vitelli stumbled. Dante caught him, spun him around, locked an arm around his throat. "Nobody touches her," Dante growled into Vitelli's ear. "Nobody!" Marcus had recovered his rifle, was already calling out commands to the tactical team. The warehouse was secure within seconds. Vitelli's remaining men either dead or surrendering, hands raised, weapons dropped. Vitelli struggled in Dante's grip, choking, his face going red, then purple. Alara watched, her hand still shaking from the adrenaline as Dante slowly choked the life out of the man who'd threatened to kill her. "Dante," she heard herself say, "stop." He didn't seem to hear her. "Dante," louder, "you're killing him." "That's the idea." His voice was eerily calm. "He's done. It's over." Alara stepped closer, close enough to touch. "You won. Let him go." He put a gun to your head. "And now you have him. You've won. Killing him now is just—" She searched for the word. "Revenge. Not justice. Just revenge." Dante's eyes met hers over Vitelli's shoulder. They were absolutely empty. Not angry, not hurt, just void. Like looking into a well with no bottom. "Sometimes revenge is justice," he said quietly. "And sometimes it's just you becoming what everyone says you are." Alara held his gaze. "You told me you needed me to see the human element, to remind you what human looks like. So I'm reminding you, right now. This isn't human. This is monster." For a long moment, nothing moved. The warehouse held its breath. Then Dante released Vitelli, who crumpled to the floor gasping and choking. Dante stepped back, his expression still empty, and gestured to Marcus. "Take him. Lock him up. We'll deal with him later." Marcus nodded, signaled to two of his men. They hauled Vitelli to his feet, dragged him toward the exit. He was still gasping, unable to speak, his eyes wild with the proximity to death. Alara felt her legs give out, just folded, like someone had cut the strings holding her upright. Dante caught her before she hit the floor, lowered her gently to sit on the concrete. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Just breathe." She tried. Her lungs didn't want to work right. Everything was catching up. The kidnapping, the fear, the violence. The moment she'd grabbed for the gun, not knowing if she'd live through it. "You saved my life," Dante said. He was still holding her, his hands solid and real against her arms. "The way you moved, if you hadn't, I know." Her voice was shaking. "I saw him start to pull the trigger. I moved. You could have died. So could you." She looked up at him, really looked. His face was a mess, blood, smoke, sweat, something that might have been tears or might have been someone else's blood running from his hairline. "You brought 60 people, started a war, for me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because—" He stopped, started again. "Because I told you I'd keep you safe, and I meant it." "That's not why." Alara's hands found his face, ignoring the blood, the grime, everything except the man underneath. "Tell me the real reason." Dante's jaw tightened. She watched him fight it. The admission, the vulnerability, the terrible, dangerous truth that neither of them wanted to speak out loud because once it was said, it couldn't be taken back. "Because the thought of you dying made me want to burn the entire city to the ground," he said finally, the words coming out raw and unwilling. "Because somewhere between you slapping me in that diner and you standing in my office telling me I was better than torture, you stopped being a tool and became—" He couldn't finish. "Became what?" "Mine." His eyes were burning. "And I don't let people take what's mine. Ever." The possessiveness should have scared her. Should have made her pull away. Remember that this man had broken bones and threatened children and lived in a world where violence was currency. Instead, Alara kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't romantic, was just desperate and messy and tasting like blood and smoke in the aftermath of violence. His hands tightened on her arms, then moved to her waist, pulling her closer. She felt his heartbeat against her chest, hammering, alive, proof that they'd both survived this. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing hard. "We need to leave," Marcus's voice cut through the moment. "Police are on their way. We have maybe 5 minutes." Dante stood, pulled Alara up with him. Her legs were steadier now, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. He kept his hand on her waist as they moved toward the exit, not willing to let her go even for the few feet to the waiting vehicles. Outside, the night was chaos. Emergency lights in the distance, sirens getting closer, Dante's tactical team loading into SUVs with military precision. Bodies were being moved, evidence being collected, the whole operation being sanitized before official eyes arrived. Dante guided Alara to his personal vehicle, the armored SUV from before, Marcus already in the driver's seat. They were pulling away before she'd fully registered the motion, leaving the warehouse and its carnage behind. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe." Dante was already on his phone, typing rapidly. Marco's still out there. Until we find him, you're not out of danger. What about Vitelli? He'll talk. Give us everything we need to dismantle what's left of his operation. Dante's voice was businesslike, the intimacy from the warehouse already being compartmentalized. Then he'll disappear. Same as Vincent, exile instead of execution. Because I asked you to spare him. Because you reminded me there's a difference between necessary violence and cruelty. He glanced at her. I'm still learning that line. You're going to have to keep reminding me. The SUV turned onto a highway, heading out of the city. Ilara watched the skyline recede in the side mirror, the fires from earlier still visible, smoke rising into the night sky. How many people died tonight? She asked quietly. Dante was silent for a moment. 14 of Vitelli's, 3 of mine. 3. She closed her eyes. 3 people who were alive this morning. 3 people who knew the risks. His voice was gentle but firm. This is the world we live in, Ilara. People die. Usually the ones who aren't smart enough or fast enough. My people were both. They just got unlucky. Do they have families? Yes. All of them. Wives, kids, parents who depended on them. Dante put his phone away. They'll be taken care of, full death benefits, education funds for the kids, continued salary for the widows until they remarry or find other work. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's what I can do. Ilara turned to look at him. You care about them. I care about maintaining the illusion that working for me is worth the risk. But his voice lacked conviction. People who feel valued fight harder, stay loyal longer. That's not why you do it. She could see through him now, through the walls he'd built. You do it because you actually care. Because somewhere under all the strategy and violence, you're still human enough to feel guilty when people die for you. Guilt is weakness. Guilt is conscience. Ilara reached for his hand, found it clenched into a fist, gently uncurled the fingers. And maybe that's what you've been missing. Someone to tell you that feeling things doesn't make you weak. It makes you capable of being more than what your father was. Dante looked at their hands, hers pale and unmarked except for the bruises from the zip ties, his scarred and blood-stained. The contrast was stark. My father would have killed Vitelli, he said quietly, slowly. Would have made an example so brutal that no one would dare challenge him again for a generation. But you're not your father. No. He met her eyes. I'm trying to be better, or at least different. It's harder than it sounds. I know. Ilara squeezed his hand. But you have help now, whether you want it or not. A small smile touched his lips, genuine, brief, but real. I definitely don't want it. It's inconvenient and dangerous and makes me second-guess decisions that used to be simple. Good. Simple decisions usually lead to simple solutions. And simple solutions in your world usually involve someone dying. Fair point. He looked out the window as they left the city limits entirely, heading into the kind of darkness that only existed outside urban sprawl. We're going to a safe house, remote, secure, untraceable. Marco won't find us there. How long do we stay? Until we find him, or until he makes a move. Dante's jaw tightened. He's smart. He'll know Vitelli failed. He'll be regrouping, finding new leverage, new angles. Men like Marco don't give up. They adapt. So we're just going to hide. We're going to prepare. He finally turned to face her fully. Marco used you once. He'll try again. Next time, I need you ready. Need you to understand what you're up against, how to defend yourself, how to survive if I'm not there. You're going to train me. I'm going to make sure you never feel that helpless again. His voice was hard. The way you grabbed Vitelli's gun, that was good instinct, bad technique. You got lucky. Next time, luck might not be enough. Ilara thought about the moment. Vitelli's finger on the trigger, her body moving before her brain caught up, the terrible certainty that she was about to die. Yeah, she said quietly. Okay. Teach me. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes, the city disappearing completely behind them. When they finally turned off the highway onto a private road, Ilara couldn't see anything except trees and darkness. The safe house appeared suddenly, modern, glass and steel, completely out of place in the wilderness. Solar panels on the roof, security cameras visible even in the dark, the kind of place designed to be off-grid and impenetrable. Marcus pulled up to the front door. "I'll do a perimeter sweep. Give me 10 minutes to make sure we weren't followed." Dante nodded, helped Alara out of the vehicle. Her legs were unsteady, exhaustion and shock finally catching up. He kept his hand on her elbow as they walked inside. The interior was minimalist. Functional furniture, security monitors covering every approach, supplies stocked for a siege. Not a home, a fortress. "Bedrooms upstairs," Dante said. "Bathrooms stocked. Get cleaned up. I need to make some calls, coordinate the search for Marco." Alara nodded, started toward the stairs, then stopped. "Dante? Yeah? Thank you for coming for me, for..." She gestured helplessly, unable to find words for the magnitude of what he'd done. "Everything." He crossed the room, stood close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of the night's violence settling onto his shoulders. "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "You wouldn't have been in danger if it weren't for me. This is my world, my enemies, my failure that let Marco get close enough to use you. You couldn't have known. I should have." His voice was harsh. "Should have seen the signs, questioned the timing, verified every person with access to you. Instead, I was too focused on Vitelli, too arrogant to think someone in my inner circle would betray me, and you almost died because of it. But I didn't." Alara put her hand on his chest, felt his heart beating fast and hard beneath her palm. "I'm here. I'm alive. We both are. This time." He covered her hand with his. "Marco's still out there, and he knows now that you matter to me. That makes you the most valuable target in this city. He'll come for you again, differently, smarter. And I can't..." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't watch you die. I won't survive that." The admission hung between them, raw and terrifying in its honesty. Alara rose on her toes, kissed him again, gentler this time, deliberate. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. We find him first." "We? You said I'm yours. That goes both ways." She pulled back enough to look him in the eye. "You don't get to protect me from the sidelines while you walk into danger. Not anymore. We're in this together, or not at all." Dante studied her face, and she watched him war with himself. The instinct to shelter her versus the knowledge that she was right, that keeping her ignorant and helpless had nearly gotten her killed. "Together," he said finally. "But you follow my lead, you learn what I teach you, and you don't take stupid risks." Says the man who brought 60 people to start a war. That wasn't stupid, that was calculated. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "There's a difference." "If you say so." Alara stepped back, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "I'm going to shower. Try not to start another war while I'm gone." "No promises." She climbed the stairs on legs that felt like lead, found the bedroom, sparse but functional, with a bathroom that had a shower large enough for 3 people. She stripped off her blood-stained clothes, left them in a pile on the floor, and stood under water hot enough to hurt. The night washed off her in streams of brown and red, other people's blood, smoke, the physical residue of violence. But the memory stayed. Vitelli's gun against her temple, the sound of breaking bones in the warehouse, Dante's face when he'd found her, equal parts relief and rage. The kiss. That stayed too. The taste of him, the desperate way he'd held her, the admission that she'd stopped being a tool and become something he couldn't afford to lose. Alara pressed her forehead against the tile and let herself shake. Let the fear she'd been holding back flood through her. Let herself acknowledge how close she'd come to dying, how many ways tonight could have ended differently. When the water finally ran cold, she got out, wrapped herself in a towel, and found clothes laid out on the bed. Simple, practical, her size. Mrs. Chen's efficiency at work again, even here. She dressed and went back downstairs. Dante was in what looked like a command center, multiple monitors showing security feeds, maps, data streams. He'd changed clothes too, though his knuckles were still split from hitting Vitelli. Marcus stood next to him, both men focused on one particular screen. "What is it?" Alara asked. Dante glanced at her, then back at the screen. "We found him. Marco. He's at the downtown office." "That's your building?" "Yes." "Which means he's making a statement." Dante's voice was tight. "He's claiming territory, showing that he's not afraid, that he considers himself the legitimate successor." So what do we do? We end this. Dante stood, started putting on a shoulder holster, checking his weapons with mechanical precision. Tonight, before he has time to consolidate power or find more allies. You're going after him. Yes. Then I'm coming with you. Both men turned to stare at her. Absolutely not, Dante said. You almost died tonight, and I'll almost die again if Marco keeps coming after me. Ilara crossed her arms. You said we're in this together, so let's be in it together. I want to see his face when you take him down. I want him to know that using me didn't work, that I'm still here, still standing. It's too dangerous. Everything's too dangerous. She walked closer, met his eyes. You can't protect me by leaving me behind. All that does is make me vulnerable when you're not around. So teach me. Bring me. Let me learn how to survive in your world instead of just being a liability. Dante's jaw worked. She could see him calculating odds, weighing risks, trying to find an argument that would convince her. Marcus cleared his throat. She has a point, boss. Marco's going to keep targeting her until he's dead. Might as well let her see how we handle threats. Could be educational. You're not helping, Dante growled. I'm being practical. Marcus shrugged. You bring her, she's protected. You leave her, you spend the whole time worrying instead of focusing. Distraction gets people killed. Dante looked between them, clearly outnumbered. Finally he sighed, long, frustrated, defeated. Fine, but you stay in the vehicle. You don't get out. You don't engage. You watch through the cameras and you learn. That's it. Ilara nodded. Deal. And if anything goes wrong, Marcus gets you out. No arguments, no heroics. Understood? Understood. Dante turned back to the monitors, started pulling up building schematics, marking entry points, coordinating with someone on his phone in clipped, precise sentences. Ilara watched him transform from the man who'd kissed her in a warehouse to the tactician who'd orchestrated a military assault. This was who he was. Both versions. The human and the machine. The man who cared and the monster who killed without hesitation. And somehow, impossibly, she was falling for both. An hour later, they were back in the city. Different SUV, different route, same armored protection. The downtown office loomed ahead, dark except for the 23rd floor, where lights blazed in the windows. Marco was up there, waiting, knowing they'd come. He's expecting us, Marcus said, stating the obvious. Good. Dante's voice was cold. Let's not disappoint him. They parked in an underground garage away from street cameras. Dante's team was already there, 12 people in tactical gear, weapons checked, expressions focused. This wasn't the 60 from before. This was precision over overwhelming force. Dante gave instructions, entry points, timing, rules of engagement. No killing unless necessary. Marco was the priority. Everyone else was negotiable. Then he turned to Ilara. Stay here. Monitor on the tablet. You see anything wrong, anything at all, you tell Marcus immediately. She nodded, accepting the tablet he handed her. The screen showed feeds from cameras throughout the building. Stairwells, elevators, the 23rd floor offices. Dante hesitated, then pulled her close, kissed her hard and fast. Don't do anything stupid. That's my line, she managed. He smiled, brief, genuine, then was gone, disappearing into the building with his team like smoke. Ilara sat in the SUV with Marcus, watching the feeds, her heart hammering. She saw Dante's team split up, taking different routes, moving with coordinated precision up through the building. He's good at this, Marcus said quietly. Better than his father ever was. Old man was all rage and intimidation. Dante thinks 3 moves ahead. How long have you worked for him? 15 years, since he was a kid, really. Watched him grow up, watched him take over, watched him become... Marcus paused. Something different than what we expected. Different how? Smarter, colder, but also, Marcus gestured vaguely. More human, somehow, like he's trying to build something better than what his father left him. Don't know if it's working, but he's trying. On the screen, Dante's team reached the 23rd floor. They stacked up outside the main entrance, weapons ready. Dante gave a signal. They breached. The office was empty except for one man sitting at the conference table like he was waiting for a meeting. Marco. Even through the grainy camera feed, Ilara could see his smile. Dante approached slowly, gun raised but not aimed. His team fanned out, securing the room, checking for threats. Took you long enough, Marco's voice came through the audio feed, tinny but clear. I've been waiting 2 hours. Where's your security? Dante asked. Where's Vitelli's backup? Gone. Called them off. Marco leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. This is between us. Always has been. You tried to kill me. Used Alara as bait. Burned my businesses. Dante's voice was flat. That's not between us. That's war. That was business. Marco stood slowly, hands visible, no weapons. I needed to demonstrate that you'd become a liability. That sentiment was making you weak. That the Empire needed stronger leadership. By strong, you mean brutal. I mean effective. Marco started walking toward Dante, ignoring the guns trained on him. Your father understood that fear keeps people in line. Respect is earned through strength, not mercy. You've forgotten that. That waitress proved it. Her name is Alara. I don't care what her name is. Marco stopped a few feet away. She's a weakness, a crack in your armor, and in this world, weakness gets you killed. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right. Alara's breath caught. I am weak, Dante continued, because I let someone matter, because I chose to care about more than just power and territory, because I looked at the way my father lived and died and decided I wanted something different. And look where it got you, Marco said. Buildings burning, people dead, your organization in chaos, all because you couldn't keep your dick out of... Dante's fist connected with Marco's face before he could finish the sentence. Marco went down hard, blood spraying from his nose. Dante was on him immediately, gun pressed against his forehead. You can insult me, Dante's voice was shaking with rage. You can betray me. You can try to kill me, but you don't talk about her. Ever. Marco laughed through the blood. There it is. The weakness. You'd rather protect her feelings than do what's necessary. What's necessary, Dante said coldly, is removing threats to my organization. You're the threat, Marco. Not Alara. You. He stood, gestured to his team. Take him. Lock him up with Vitelli. They can rot together. 2 guards moved forward to grab Marco. That's when everything went wrong. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to blow out the windows and fill the room with smoke. Flashbangs followed, disorienting everyone, turning the cameras to static. Alara's screen went dark. What happened? She gripped the tablet. Marcus, what? Stay here. Marcus was already out of the vehicle, weapon drawn, running toward the building. Alara sat frozen, staring at the blank screen, her mind racing. Backup plan. Marco had a backup plan. Of course he did. He'd been waiting, knowing Dante would come, prepared for exactly this. Minutes crawled past. No updates. No contact. Just silence, and the sick certainty that something had gone terribly wrong. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Hello, Alara. Marco's voice, slightly distorted. By now you've probably noticed the cameras are down. Don't worry. I have Dante. Alive. For now. Her blood turned to ice. Where is he? Rooftop, just him and me, having the conversation we should have had 6 months ago. Marco paused. You want him to live? You come up here, alone. You have 5 minutes. The line went dead. Alara stared at the phone, her mind screaming at her that this was a trap, that going up there was suicide, that Dante would never forgive her for taking this risk. But she was already moving, out of the SUV, into the building, past the elevator, too slow, too obvious, to the stairwell. She climbed, her legs burning, her breath coming in gasps, 23 flights feeling like 100. When she reached the roof access, the door was already open. She stepped out into cold night air and saw them. Dante on his knees, hands behind his head, blood running down the side of his face. Marco standing behind him, gun pressed to the back of his skull. They both turned to look at her. There she is, Marco said. Right on time. You always were predictable, Dante. Told her not to come, didn't you? But she came anyway because she loves you, and love makes people stupid. Let him go, Alara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Why would I do that? Marco smiled. I finally have you both exactly where I want you. Seems wasteful to. Why would I do that? Marco's smile was cold in the rooftop wind. I finally have you both exactly where I want you. Seems wasteful to let either of you walk away. Alara stood 15 feet from them, the city sprawling below in a carpet of lights that looked almost peaceful from up here. Her hands were empty, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. 23 stories of empty air behind her. Marco and his gun in front, Dante bleeding on his knees between them. "You called me up here," Alara said. "So I'm here. Let him go and we can talk." "Talk," Marco laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "What do we have to talk about? You're a waitress who got lucky, stumbled into a world you don't understand, and somehow convinced this idiot that you were worth dying for." "Then shoot me." Alara took a step forward. "That's what you want, isn't it? To prove he's weak because he cares about me? So do it. Pull the trigger. Show him what caring costs." "Alara, don't!" Dante's voice was rough, desperate. Marco pressed the gun harder against Dante's skull, silencing him. "She's smarter than you give her credit for. She knows I won't shoot her. Not yet. Because the moment she dies, you stop caring about staying alive. And I need you alive long enough to watch your empire transfer to someone competent." "It won't transfer," Dante said flatly. "You kill me. The organization fractures. 30 different people trying to claim pieces. The violence will be catastrophic." "Not if I have her." Marco's eyes glittered. "Alive, she's your weakness. Dead, she's your motivation to cooperate. Either way, she's useful." "Except you're forgetting something," Alara said. She took another step closer, watching Marco's finger on the trigger, calculating distance she didn't know how to calculate. "Dante taught me that everything's negotiable, that power isn't about being the strongest. It's about being willing to do what others won't." "And what are you willing to do?" Marco's voice dripped contempt. "You're not a killer. You're not even a fighter. You're just a woman who made bad choices and got in over her head. You're right." Alara stopped walking, 10 feet away now, close enough to see the sweat on Marco's forehead despite the cold. "I'm not a killer, but I am willing to die. And that's something you can't leverage." She saw understanding flash in Marco's eyes a split second before she moved, not toward him, toward the edge. She ran, full sprint, her feet pounding concrete, the drop getting closer with each step. Behind her, Marco shouted something. Dante screamed her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 3 feet from the edge, she dove. Not over. That would be suicide with no purpose. But down and to the side, rolling behind the rooftops' mechanical housing, the concrete scraping her arms as she tumbled into cover. The gunshot came exactly when she expected it. Marco firing where she'd been, the bullet sparking off concrete. Then chaos. Dante moved the instant Marco's attention shifted. Alara heard it more than saw it. The grunt of impact, bodies hitting the ground, the skittering sound of the gun sliding across concrete. She scrambled to her feet, looked around the corner. Dante and Marco were grappling, rolling, both fighting for control. The gun was 6 feet away, closer to Alara than to either of them. She ran for it, her hands closing around cold metal that felt heavier than it should. She'd never held a gun before, never wanted to, but she picked it up anyway, turned, aimed it at the struggling men with shaking hands. "Stop!" Her voice cracked. "Both of you, stop!" They didn't stop. Couldn't, probably. Adrenaline and rage and years of resentment between them, making separation impossible. Dante got on top, his fist connecting with Marco's face. Marco twisted, used his weight to roll them, got his hands around Dante's throat. Alara's finger found the trigger. The gun was pointed at them, but she couldn't shoot, couldn't risk hitting Dante, couldn't make herself pull the trigger even on Marco. Then she saw movement behind them. The rooftop access door opening, figures emerging. Marcus and 3 other guards, weapons drawn, fanning out. "Boss!" Marcus shouted. The distraction was enough. Dante broke Marco's grip, rolled away, came up in a crouch. Marco tried to follow, but Marcus was already there, gun pressed against his temple. "Don't," Marcus said quietly. "Please don't. Give me a reason." Marco went still, breathing hard, his face a mess of blood and bruises. Dante stood slowly, one hand pressed to his ribs where Marco had gotten in some good hits. His eyes found Alara, still holding the gun with shaking hands. "Put it down," he said gently. "It's over." Alara looked at the gun, at her hands wrapped around it, at how easy it would be to just point it at Marco and squeeze. End the threat, protect Dante, protect herself. Become exactly what this world wanted her to be. She set it on the concrete and stepped back. Dante crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled her against his chest. She felt his heart hammering, felt the tremor in his hands as he held her, felt the fear he'd been holding back flood out in one shaking breath. "You ran toward the edge," he said into her hair. "I thought you were jumping. I know." Her voice was muffled against his shirt. "I'm sorry. It was the only play I could see. It was insane." It worked. He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "Don't ever do anything like that again. Ever. Do you understand me?" "No promises." Alara managed a weak smile. "You keep putting me in situations where insane is the only option." Behind them, Marcus hauled Marco to his feet. "What do you want me to do with him?" Dante turned, his arms still around Alara's shoulders. He looked at Marco, the man who'd served his father for 20 years, who'd taught him the business, who'd decided betrayal was easier than loyalty. "You wanted to prove I was weak," Dante said quietly, "that caring about someone made me vulnerable. So here's your proof. I'm letting you live." Marco's eyes widened. "What?" "Exile, same as Vincent, same as Vitelli. New identity, one-way ticket to somewhere far from here, enough money to start over." Dante's voice was flat. "But you don't get to die a martyr. You don't get to be remembered as the loyal soldier who tried to save the empire from a weak leader. You get to be the coward who ran, who failed, who wasn't strong enough to do what he accused me of being too weak to do." "You think that's mercy?" Marco spat blood. "That's worse than killing me." "I know." Dante's smile was cold. "That's why I'm doing it. You wanted to replace me, to prove you were better suited to lead. But a real leader knows when to kill and when to let someone live with their failure. You never learned that. My father never taught you, so you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you had everything you wanted within reach and you weren't good enough to take it." Marco lunged, but Marcus was ready, holding him back. "You're making a mistake, Dante. I'll come back. You won't." Dante's voice went deadly quiet. "Because I'm not exiling you to some comfortable retirement. I'm sending you to people who owe me favors. People who will make sure you understand exactly what exile means. You'll be watched, controlled, every move monitored. Any attempt to come back, any contact with this city, and those people have orders to make you disappear. Permanently. No body, no grave, no evidence you ever existed." He stepped closer to Marco, close enough that only Alara could hear what he said next. "You used her to try to destroy me, so I'm using her to show you mercy you don't deserve. Every day you're alive, you'll remember that a waitress had more strength than you, that she faced death and didn't blink, that she's everything you said would make me weak, and instead she made me stronger. Live with that, Marco. Live with knowing you lost to someone you thought was beneath you." Dante stepped back, nodded to Marcus. "Get him out of my sight." They dragged Marco toward the roof access, his protests fading as they disappeared into the stairwell. The other guards followed, leaving Dante and Alara alone on the rooftop with the wind and the city lights and the aftermath of violence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dante's legs gave out. Not dramatically, just a slow collapse, like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. He sat down hard on the concrete, his hand going to his ribs, his face going pale. Alara was beside him immediately. "You're hurt." "Cracked rib. Maybe 2. He tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "Marco got in a few good hits before you decided to give me a heart attack by running at the edge. I didn't know what else to do." Alara's hands were shaking again as she checked him over, looking for other injuries. Blood on his face from a cut above his eyebrow, bruises blooming on his knuckles, his shirt torn where Marco had grabbed him. "I just knew I had to break his focus. You almost broke me." Dante caught her hands, held them still. "When I saw you running, I thought—" He stopped, unable to finish. "I know." She squeezed his hands. "But I'm here. We both are." "Yeah." He looked at her, really looked, like he was memorizing her face. "We are." They sat there on the rooftop, the city breathing below them, and Alara felt something shift, not just between them, but inside her, like she'd crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross, become someone she'd never planned to be. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we clean up the mess." Dante's voice was tired. "Vitelli's organization is scattered. Marco's gone. But there will be others. There are always others. People who think I'm vulnerable, that the Empire's weak, that they can take what isn't theirs. So it never ends. No. He was quiet for a moment. But maybe it changes. Maybe instead of just fighting to maintain what my father built, I start building something different, something better. With me. If you'll stay. Dante's eyes met hers. I can't promise it'll be safe. Can't promise there won't be more nights like this. Can't promise you won't regret the choice. But I can promise I'll protect you with everything I have, and I can promise to listen when you tell me I'm crossing a line. Alara thought about her apartment that wasn't hers anymore. About the diner where she'd spent 4 years slowly dying. About Maya and the cafe and the debt that had started all of this. About the warehouse and the basement and the gun she'd held with shaking hands. About the kiss and the smoke. About Dante's face when he'd found her. About the terrible, beautiful truth that she'd found something real in the middle of all this darkness. I'll stay, she said, but on one condition. Name it. You stop trying to protect me from your world and start teaching me how to survive in it. She held his gaze. I'm not your weakness, Dante. I'm not something fragile you have to hide away. I'm either your partner or I'm nothing. And if I'm your partner, I need to know everything. How it works, how to defend myself, how to make the hard calls when you're not there. Dante was quiet for a long time. She watched him process it, fight it, try to find an argument that would let him keep her safe and separate from the violence that defined his existence. Finally, he nodded. Okay, partners. But you follow my lead until you're ready to lead yourself. Deal. He stood slowly, wincing as his ribs protested, then offered her his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. They stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out at the city that had tried to destroy them both. I used to hate this view, Dante said quietly. Used to look at all those lights and see nothing but problems. Territory to control, threats to eliminate, resources to extract. My father taught me to see the city as something to dominate. And now? Now I see 3 million people just trying to survive. Most of them don't care about empires and territory. They just want to go to work, feed their families, have something left over at the end of the month. He paused. Maybe that's what I should be protecting. Not my power. Them. That's dangerously close to idealism. Alara leaned against his shoulder, careful of his ribs. Idealism gets you killed in your world. Then maybe it's time to change what my world is. Dante's arm came around her. My father built an empire on fear. I inherited it, maintained it, expanded it. But what if I rebuilt it on something else? Not charity. I'm not naive enough to think criminals suddenly become philanthropists, but sustainability, fair terms, protection that actually protects instead of just extorting. You're talking about completely restructuring how you operate. I'm talking about evolution. He looked at her. You showed me it's possible, that mercy doesn't have to mean weakness, that there's a difference between necessary violence and cruelty. If I can learn that, I can learn other things. Can build something that lasts because people choose to participate, not because they're terrified to refuse. That's going to make you enemies. I already have enemies. Dante's voice was wry. Might as well have them for the right reasons. They stood together as the night wind picked up, carrying the smell of the city, exhaust and concrete and humanity packed too tight. Below them, sirens wailed, emergency lights flickered, the machinery of civilization grinding forward, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadows. Marcus appeared in the rooftop access doorway. We should go, boss. Police are asking questions about the explosions. We need to be somewhere else when they start looking for answers. Dante nodded, started toward the door with Alara beside him. They descended through the building, past the 23rd floor, where broken windows let in cold air, past the lobby where security cameras had been conveniently disabled, into the parking garage where the SUV waited. The drive back to the safe house was quiet. Alara watched the city slide past, thinking about everything that had changed in the space of a week. How she'd gone from serving coffee to holding a gun, from struggling to pay rent to living in a penthouse, from invisible to indispensable. The cost was still being calculated. 3 of Dante's people dead. Vitelli's organization scattered but not destroyed. Marco exiled but not eliminated. And Alara herself, transformed in ways she was still trying to understand. When they reached the safe house, dawn was breaking. thin gray light turning the wilderness around them into something almost beautiful. Marcus did another perimeter sweep while Dante and Ilara went inside. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving Ilara exhausted down to her bones. She sank onto the couch, her body remembering every impact, every moment of terror, every second she'd thought she wouldn't survive. Dante disappeared into the bathroom, came back with a first aid kit. He sat beside her, started cleaning the scrapes on her arms from when she dove behind the mechanical housing. "This is gonna sting," he said, dabbing antiseptic on the worst of them. It did. Ilara hissed, but didn't pull away. "You saved my life tonight," Dante said quietly, focused on his work. "When you ran at the edge, when you drew Marco's attention, if you hadn't done that, he would have pulled the trigger. I was out of moves. So were I. I just made one up. That's what makes you dangerous." He moved to the other arm, his touch gentle despite his split knuckles. "You don't think like someone from this world. You see angles we've been trained not to see, moves that seem insane until they work." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He finished with the antiseptic, started applying bandages. And a warning: the more you embrace that instinct, the more you become someone who belongs here, who can't go back to the person you were before. "I know." Ilara watched his hands work, steady despite everything. "I felt it on the rooftop, when I picked up the gun, when I thought about how easy it would be to just shoot Marco and end it. There was a second where I wanted to, where it felt right. But you didn't." "No. But I thought about it, and that's—" She struggled for words. "That's new. The old me, the waitress me, would have been horrified at the thought. Now it's just logical. Remove the threat, protect what matters. Simple math. That's how it starts." Dante set aside the first aid kit, his eyes serious. "First you think about it. Then you justify it. Then you do it. Then it becomes easier each time until you don't think about it at all. Until violence is just another tool you reach for without questioning. Like you. Like I was." He corrected gently. "You're changing me, Ilara. Making me question things I stopped questioning years ago. The least I can do is make sure I don't turn you into what I'm trying not to be. What if I'm already changing? What if this is who I actually am under all the poverty and desperation? Someone who can look at violence and not flinch. Then we figure out how to be that person without losing the part that still cares." Dante touched her face, his thumb brushing the bruise forming on her cheek. "You ran at the edge tonight not to kill Marco, but to save me. That's the difference. Your violence, if you choose it, comes from protection. Mine came from power. Those are different motivations, different souls." Ilara leaned into his touch, exhaustion pulling at her. "I don't know if I can do this. Be your partner in a world where people die and buildings burn and the price of caring is measured in blood. You've already been doing it. Tonight proved that. Tonight proved I can survive one crisis. That doesn't mean I can survive a lifetime of them." "No one can promise you a lifetime." Dante's voice was quiet. "I've seen too many people die young, too many plans destroyed by bad luck or worse timing. All anyone can promise is right now. This moment. And in this moment, I need you. Not because you're a tool or a weakness, because you make me believe there's something better worth building." Ilara looked at him, this man who'd broken bones and threatened children and built an empire on fear, who was trying desperately to be something more than what his father had made him, who'd brought 60 people to war for her, who'd chosen exile over execution because she'd asked him to see the human cost. "Okay," she said finally. "Right now, this moment, I'm in. That's all I'm asking." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "The rest we figure out as we go." They sat together as the sun rose higher, turning the safe house windows into squares of gold. Outside, Marcus was making calls, coordinating the cleanup, managing the empire that never stopped needing management. Inside, Dante and Ilara existed in a pocket of stillness, stealing rest before the world demanded they move again. Ilara's phone buzzed. She pulled it out. Actual text this time, not unknown numbers with threats and manipulation. "Maya, are you okay? Haven't heard from you in days, starting to worry." Ilara stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could she say? That she'd been kidnapped, held at gunpoint, saved by a tactical assault? That she'd fallen for a crime lord who was trying to reform? That her old life was so far behind her it might as well be someone else's memory. She typed, "I'm fine. New job is intense but good. I'll explain soon, promise." Maya's response came immediately. "You better. Miss you. Miss you too." Alara put the phone down, feeling the weight of the lie. Maya was safe, protected by Dante's umbrella, free to build her cafe into something her grandmother would be proud of. But the distance between them was growing, every day pulling Alara deeper into a world Maya could never know about. "You can tell her the truth," Dante said quietly. "Not everything, but enough that she understands why you're different now." "What would I say? Hey, Maya, remember that debt your brother created? I sold myself to a crime lord to save you, and now I'm in too deep to get out?" You could say you found work that matters, that you're helping someone build something better, that you made a choice, and you're living with it. Dante paused. "That's all true. Doesn't require the details. She'll know I'm hiding something." "Probably. Best friends usually do." He shifted, wincing as his ribs protested. "But she'll also know you're alive and choosing to stay in contact. That has to count for something." Alara thought about Maya's face when Dante had threatened her cafe. The tears, the fear, the helplessness. She thought about her own face in the mirror that first morning, exhausted and defeated and so tired of losing. Neither of them were those people anymore. Maya had her cafe, her future, her chance. Alara had this, whatever this was. Partnership with a man trying to evolve, purpose in a world that ran on violence but didn't have to be only violence. The chance to matter in ways that terrified and exhilarated her. "Yeah," she said finally, "it counts." The next weeks passed in a blur of reconstruction. Vitelli's remaining people were absorbed into Dante's organization or encouraged to leave the city entirely. The buildings that had burned were rebuilt, this time with better security, better oversight, better care for the people who worked in them. Marco was shipped to a remote location. Dante never told Alara where, and she didn't ask. Some details were better left unknown. Dante kept his promise. He taught her, not just self-defense, though she spent hours in the mansion's gym learning how to fight, how to shoot, how to move through the world, ready for violence, but the architecture of his empire. The money flows, the territory agreements, the delicate balance of power that kept 3,000 people employed and safe. She learned the difference between protection and extortion. Learned how to read contracts for hidden clauses that would trap people in debt. Learned to spot the warning signs of operations going rotten, of people